The story begins with Yijun kneeling in tears before his wife, Siwoo. He begs for her consent to a divorce, bowing to the floor in submission. Siwoo smirks, content with his humiliation, and agrees to the divorce. She sits relaxed in a chair, looking down at Yijun as he bows, even pushing him slightly with her foot. She coldly asks what he can offer her in return for the divorce. Yijun can barely hold back his tears, biting his lips to suppress his emotions. His life is falling apart, and the root of his problems is his family, particularly his despised father. All day long, the old man either drinks or gambles, raising his voice at his already adult son. After his mother's death, Yijun continued living with his father, as he was the only family Yijun had left. Despite this, the man paid no attention to his son. Yijun was forced to take multiple part-time jobs outside of his office work just to stay afloat. He even worked as a waiter in a diner to feed himself. One day, Yijun noticed a father and young son who entered the diner. The child was being naughty and accidentally spilled some water. The father turned to Yijun, asking for a towel or napkins. Despite the inconvenience, the father did not scold his son but instead took care of him. Yijun realized he was envious of such familial closeness, something he never experienced. At home, his father, once again drunk, asked Yijun to lend him 10 million won. Yijun was shocked by the request, as it was a large sum for him. He tried reasoning with his father, but the old man promised to return the money double. He talked about a new currency that was supposed to change the future, an investment he believed would pay off. Yijun replied that he valued his hard-earned money more than a dubious chance of making a fortune. However, his father would not hear any excuses. He admitted to always being a hopeless drunk who raised his hand against his son, but now he begged Yijun for one more chance to change. The father's desperation was so evident that tears came to his eyes. Despite his annoyance, Yijun could not refuse his father. He desperately wanted to save their relationship and make it a normal family again. He decided to trust his father one last time and lent him the money. The father thanked Yijun profusely, hugged him, and promised his son would not regret it. However, his joyful cries did little to inspire Yijun with hope for success, and for good reason. Soon, Yijun's last remaining relative left this world as well. His father died in a car accident, losing control in the rain and dying on the spot. Yijun held his father's funeral, and thoughts about the currency faded into the background. Though he felt sad about losing the last member of his family, he also felt a sense of freedom. Experiencing mixed emotions, he spent his time drinking, just as his father did not long ago. Left alone, he reflected on the strangeness of his life. One evening, while watching TV during dinner, Yijun saw an interview with a young man. Despite his age, the man had already achieved great success in the investment field. Yijun wondered whether the man's success involved buying a house or something similar. However, it turned out the discussion was about large assets amounting to 4 billion Korean won, which made Yijun cough in surprise. The host asked the young man what he had invested in, and the man revealed that he had chosen bitcoins, the same currency Yijun's father had mentioned. Yijun's mind raced as he connected the dots, realizing that the man on the screen had made a fortune doing something he himself had dismissed. He grabbed his phone, wanting to confirm what he had just heard, and downloaded an online wallet app. The host reflected on how profitable it would have been to invest in Bitcoin at the very beginning of its journey. The interviewee confidently stated that no one could have expected such a significant price increase, but if someone had invested when Yijun's father did, their investment would have grown 2,500 times. Yijun stared at his phone in disbelief. He had a massive amount of money in his account. He nearly fainted, unable to believe what he was seeing. The rise in the price of Bitcoin had driven many around the world crazy, and Yijun felt like he was barely holding on. His account now showed 25 billion won, a staggering 2,500 times more than his initial investment. Yijun spent the entire evening in shock, repeatedly checking his online wallet, unable to comprehend his newfound wealth. To clear his head, Yijun rides his bike down the street despite the cool weather. Even after a while, he still can't believe that he has more than 20 billion won in his account. At home, he can't stop checking the market price, which is changing at an incredible speed. Unable to decide whether to sell his assets now, he returns to his dilapidated house, torn by inner conflict. He thinks that, having been thrifty all his life, he should be able to be patient, but curiosity gets the better of him. Yijun decides to check his savings once again, praying in disbelief as sweat covers his brow. The amount has changed once more, and in the time he took to clear his head, his assets increased by another $2 million, bringing his total to 2 billion won. Despite his increased wealth, Yijun still goes to work at the office. During a meeting, the head of the department, to which Yijun belongs, discusses the company's possible customers. The employees discuss potential risks of collaborating with a clinic located in Busan. The department head suggests that someone from the group will need to be sent to Busan on a business trip. trip. Except for Yijun, no one volunteers. Everyone else averts their eyes. The department head tries to confirm if Yijun is sure, as he looks very tired, but Yijun, who has been spending all his time researching his assets, insists that everything is fine. The department head decides that Yijun will need someone to accompany him. Jinna, one of the most beautiful and popular girls in the company, volunteers to go with him. Yijun's colleagues look at Jinna, imagining spending time with her. Other male employees immediately start clamoring to join the business trip, but the boss decides that 2 people are enough, so Yijun and Jinna are chosen to go to Busan. The two travel by car to their destination to handle business matters. Jinna mentions that she loves driving the car her brother sold her last year. Busan is Jinna's hometown, and while she used to visit often, her workload and weekend sports activities have kept her too busy lately. They chat for a while, and Yijun wonders what to do with his life now that he has so much money. The trip takes place at a leisurely pace, and the conversation between Yijun and Jinna is pleasant. When they stop to take a break, Yijun buys Jinna a coffee. He is surprised that his colleagues are so eager to discuss work issues with Jinna, and she thanks him for his help. Jinna fidgets, embarrassed, and averts her eyes, her cheeks flushing. Finally, she gathers the courage to ask Yijun if he wants to go shopping with her in the evening. Jinna hasn't gone shopping in a long time and also has something she wants to talk about. Yijun thinks about her suggestion but decides it would be nice to distract himself, so he agrees. Later, the two of them go shopping. They start by visiting a clothing store to look at business suits. Yijun, who has lost the habit of shopping, wonders why he can't just order the same thing online at a better price. Jinna suddenly offers to help Yijun choose and buy a suit, surprising him with the offer. The clothes are a sort of bribe, as Jinna has an awkward request. Since Yijun has enough money for shopping, he demands that Jinna stop delaying the awkward conversation. Blushing deeply, Jinna carefully chooses her words and finally asks Yijun to pretend to be her boyfriend in front of her parents. He is stunned, but Jinna explains that her younger sister already has a partner, and their parents are pressuring Jinna to find someone. Blushing at the unexpected request, Yijun tries to process it but eventually agrees to help his colleague. That evening, they go to a restaurant where they meet Jinna's parents, who are very happy to meet their daughter's chosen one. They engage in polite conversation with Yijun, make jokes, and try to please him. They ask if the two work for the same company, and Yijun confirms it. Jinna's mother is curious about how they became friends, and Yijun explains that they grew close when he taught her the basics of their job. Satisfied with the answer, her parents continued the peaceful meal. Yijun recalls a very different dinner with his ex-wife's relatives, who were negative and aggressive towards him. They raised their voices, asked numerous questions about his parents, who had already passed away at that time, and bombarded him with questions about money and real estate. They pressured Yijun, making it clear that after the wedding, he would be expected to support them financially. He felt immense pressure and contempt from them, and his own opinions were of no interest to anyone. He failed to impress his ex-wife's relatives, but in stark contrast, Jinna's parents warmly accepted him, making him feel at peace. Jinna's mother asks if Yijun enjoyed the food, and he enthusiastically praises her cooking. The experience he shares during this fake date with Jinna is completely different from what he experienced in his previous marriage. After the meeting, they warmly say goodbye to Jinna's parents, who are pleased with the encounter. Jinna's mother subtly hints that she doesn't need to return home to spend the night. Yijun reflects that only his newfound wealth helped him avoid feeling uncomfortable that evening, as his ex-wife had once trampled on his confidence. As Jinna's mother laughs with the couple, she teases them, asking when they plan to give her a granddaughter. Embarrassed by such a warm welcome, Yijun feels a mixture of emotions, overhearing Jinna's parents discussing how he isn't bad for their daughter. After meeting Jinna's parents, Yijun and Jinna go for a walk on the beach. Jinna bows to Yijun in embarrassment and apologizes. She feels very awkward about the evening. Yijun immediately tries to calm her down, but Jinna mentions that she noticed his tense expression during her parents' questions. Yijun realizes that Jinna knows about his previous marriage and quickly reassures her, saying that her parents were kind and the food was delicious, so he wasn't offended. However, since Jinna still seems to regret the situation, he suggests smoothing things over by walking around some interesting places. Jinna immediately starts thinking about the best route, becoming so engrossed in planning that she walks ahead of Yijun. He calls out for her to slow down but then realizes that Jinna is just very focused on the task, chuckling as he remembers her mother's words about Jinna's stubbornness. Suddenly, Jinna's eyes catch something on the beach, and she has an idea. She points to a spot where she wants to take Yijun. As they approach, Yijun feels uncomfortable comfortable and grins nervously. It turns out Jinna is interested in a fortune teller's tent nearby. When they decide to get their fortunes told, Jinna receives a positive reading, with the fortune teller describing her as having good and pure energy. The fortune teller praises Jinna both as a colleague and as a person, making her very happy about her prospects in life. However, the fortune teller notes that Jinna recently missed an important opportunity and advises her to be braver and not hesitate in the future. Yijun listens to their conversation skeptically, as he doesn't believe in fortune telling. The fortune teller assures Jinna that she'll have another chance and needs to stay strong and attentive. Yijun can barely hold back a sigh at the fortune teller's words, but Jinna persuades him to participate as well, insisting that the fortune teller is trustworthy. Reluctantly, Yijun agrees, even though he doesn't have any specific questions. The fortune teller's intense gaze focuses on him, and the first thing she mentions is the hungry times he endured, which shocks him. Yijun is stunned that the fortune teller knows about the poverty he faced in his youth. However, she continues, telling Yijun that he has caught great luck, something she even envies. She advises him to travel the world and experience life to the fullest, assuring him that doing so will multiply his luck even more. She tells him that he can live as he wishes without looking back at the past, and that he will succeed. Jinna casually tries to find out how lucky Yijun is in his personal life, but he is lost in thought about the fortune teller's words and has no idea how to change his lifestyle. However, he is pleased to hear the positive predictions. When it comes time to pay for the fortune telling, Yijun is horrified by the large amount, even though he has hundreds of times more in his account. Despite this, they leave the fortune teller in high spirits. Jinna invites Yijun to eat some seafood with her at the market, taking the still thoughtful man by the jacket and leading him along. Yijun doesn't know what to expect from the future yet, but he's starting to feel interested in it. It takes the heroes 4 days to establish their work in Busan, after which they return from the business trip. Yijun returns to his abandoned apartment and immediately rushes to his computer to check the Bitcoin rate. At first, he is horrified that he didn't sell his assets sooner, as he lost 200 million won, but very soon, he earns 300 million won in an hour. He exhales with relief but still doesn't understand what to do with his assets. Mentally exhausted from spending the entire weekend watching the Bitcoin rate, he is tormented by doubts about when to sell his assets and whether it's worth doing at all. When the weekend ends, Yijun returns to work at the office. During lunch, he listens to his colleagues discuss real estate investments. As a result, Yijun never gets a proper rest and isn't fully focused. Now, with 40 billion won in his account, he wonders if the price of Bitcoin can rise even higher. His colleagues curiously ask how his trip to Busan went with Jinna, and Yijun responds calmly. Older colleagues tease him lightheartedly about the trip, but Yijun remains composed. His colleagues return to discussing investments. The manager, whom Yijun assists, mentions that he is thinking about investing in Bitcoin, causing Yijun to shudder. The men reflect on how much they could have earned if they had invested earlier. They decide to study the potential of Bitcoin investment in detail. Conversations about cryptocurrency become more animated, and this time, Yijun focuses on the discussion. After hearing his colleagues, he decides that Bitcoin will continue to grow. This overwhelming greed consumes Yijun, making him want to wait and not sell his assets just yet. He continues to keenly monitor the changes in Bitcoin's market price. However, Yijun is shocked when the price of Bitcoin plummets, and he loses 6 billion won. During his next break at work, he steps outside to get some fresh air, but the lost money haunts him. Yijun struggles to come to terms with the fact that the amount he lost in waiting could have equaled 140 years of his salary. He immediately grabs his phone to check his assets, seized with excitement and pondering whether to urgently sell his Bitcoins. He tells himself there's no need to be greedy anymore. After all, he already has more than 30 billion won. Just then, Yijun is approached by his colleague, eager to find out what he's doing. Startled by the interruption, Yijun flinches. His colleague chuckles when he sees Yijun checking the Bitcoin rate and asks if he's thinking of investing. Yijun sweats nervously, trying to come up with an answer. His colleagues, noticing that he doesn't look well, assume he's having some trouble with his investments. Though he doesn't reveal the real amount, they still support him and wish him good luck. Yijun sighs heavily, torn over whether the price of Bitcoin will rise again. He asks his colleagues if they've seen the recent price collapse. The men exchange grins and shake their heads. Curious, Yijun presses them for the reason behind their smiles. One of his colleagues explains that he doesn't follow the news, showing Yijun the current Bitcoin rate. Yijun is completely speechless. The price has jumped up again, and quite significantly. Tears of relief well up in his eyes, and his colleagues rally around him, offering words of encouragement. They assure him that the real surge is just beginning. One of them even mentions that he bought Bitcoins and has already earned over 1 million won. However, Yijun remains terrified of another drop, though his colleague's confidence gives him hope that perhaps he can still wait. The very next day, there's a sharp spike in Bitcoin's price, shaking the global community. Suddenly, everyone is talking about cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is now being hailed as a store of value that surpasses gold. The following day, the cost of Bitcoin reaches an exorbitant figure, and Yi-jun's assets soar past 100 billion won. When Yi-jun sees the total amount, he becomes hysterical. His heart races, sweat pours down his face, and he struggles to breathe normally. All he can do is try to breathe calmly and steady himself. Yi-jun forces himself to calm down, reminding himself that this isn't his money until he sells his assets. Now, it's really time for him to make a decision. He can't postpone it any longer. Yi-jun is tormented by whether to sell everything or wait a little longer. Not used to handling such vast amounts of money, he's afraid of making the wrong move. Greed overwhelms him, convincing him that he could earn even more if he just waits. Dark thoughts creep into Yi-jun's mind, pushing him to chase after tens of billions without lifting a finger. As he succumbs to these thoughts, a memory of his father, who once assured him that everything would work out, flashes through his mind. Yi-jun looks at a framed picture of his father on the shelf. His father had believed that buying this new currency was his chance to become a better person and parent. When his father spent his time gambling, he always promised to buy Yi-jun new clothes and a bag if he won big. But his father had been putting off living his life all this time, and Yi-jun realizes that it's time for him to make a change. The next day, Jinna is actively working in the office, typing important documents. She stretches with pleasure to ease the stiffness from sitting still for a long time. Jinna notices that Yi-jun never showed up in the office after they returned. She approaches one of the managers and presents the results of her work, and he thanks her for her effort. The manager tells her that Yi-jun took a day off because he is not in the office. Jinna hopes that nothing serious happened to him. Meanwhile, Yi-jun finally leaves his house and goes shopping. His first destination is a car dealership. The salesperson asks if he has any specific wishes, and although Yi-jun feels uncomfortable, one car still catches his attention. A recently released white Ferrari model, perfect for both city driving and sports. Yi-jun decides to buy it, but when the salesperson starts discussing payment options, Yi-jun interrupts him, holding out a bank card and offering to pay immediately in full. The day before, Yi-jun sold his assets and earned $100 million, or 100 billion won. Now Yi-jun is young and rich, but he doesn't immediately know what to do with such a vast amount of money. He decides to buy girls first, a car first, and now has to wait for it to be delivered from the dealership. After spending what would have been an enormous sum by his previous standards, Yi-jun leaves the dealership. He is belatedly panicked that he has spent almost $500 million, but he realizes he has taken the first step toward fulfilling his dreams. Next on his list is the purchase of a luxury apartment. At the real estate agency, the employees actively welcome Yi-jun. He reveals that he needs a spacious apartment in a new building with a view of the Han River. This is typically very expensive property, so the agency's employees are very interested in such a client. Yi-jun and the realtor go to see one of the options, a very large, newly built complex. Living there will cost him 22 billion won. The realtor tells Yi-jun about the benefits of the complex, such as walking paths, gardens, a swimming pool, and a gym. The apartment they are viewing is on the 11th floor, and the realtor invites Yi-jun to follow him. As is common in many Korean apartments, the door opens with a key card. Stepping inside, Yi-jun feels overwhelmed by the size of the apartment. It's so large that he jokes about being able to go jogging inside. The realtor tells him that the apartment is fully furnished with high-quality materials. The realtor shows him 2 bathrooms, each larger than Yi-jun's current apartment. Yi-jun jokes about not having to worry about mosquitoes or noise, and the realtor agrees, noting the advantages of high-rise living. For Yi-jun, the apartment is so luxurious that he would be willing to live in less comfortable conditions. He opens a window and is speechless at the view of the river. It's so beautiful and impressive that he admires it out loud. The realtor asks for his opinion and offers to show other options, but Yi-jun is satisfied with this one. He tells the realtor that he'll take it. The real estate agency prepares the contract, which Yi-jun signs immediately. He is then asked to pay an initial fee and a brokerage commission for the transaction. Yi-jun takes out the suitcase he brought with him and replies that he will pay the entire amount up front. He opens the suitcase, clarifying that the payment will be in cash. The real estate agents are horrified at the sight of so much cash, but Yi-jun asks them to provide a receipt for the brokerage fee. Meanwhile, in the office where Yi-jun works, Hanjo is flirting with a colleague in the pantry. He had taken her to a restaurant the day before and is now suggesting a better place. Hanjo grins as he flirts, and the girl responds to his advances. Suddenly, their interaction is interrupted by Jinna bursting into the pantry. She quickly approaches Hanjo, waiting for his girlfriend to step back. Jinna steps closer, almost closing the distance between them, wanting to discuss something important. Hanjo is stunned by such an approach and doesn't understand what Jinna could want from him. She looks at him menacingly and asks if he knows where Yijun lives. Hanjo doesn't understand why a popular girl like Jinna would need Yijun's address. Jinna replies that she wants to visit him because she's worried about his long absence from work. Hanjo wonders if Jinna is this concerned about all her colleagues, but he doesn't know where Yijun lives either. However, he offers to call Yijun and ask. He contacts Yijun via messenger, and Yijun agrees to give them his address. Watching Jinna's eager reaction, Hanjo wonders if she's interested in his senior colleague. As he watches her, Jinna almost hums with joy at the thought of the upcoming meeting. After a day's work, Jinna and Hanjo decide to buy Yijun some gifts and visit his house. Jinna, curious about what Yijun's home might be like, imagines that he lives in a small, neat, and clean apartment since he lives alone. Hanjo also tries to envision Yijun's place, thinking it must be minimally furnished, given that Yijun probably still lives where he lived before his marriage. When they arrive in the neighborhood where Yijun lives, it doesn't look the way they expected. Once inside the apartment, Hanjo and Jinna recoil in shock and horror. Yijun thanks them for coming and apologizes for having to hide behind the excuse of feeling unwell at work. The apartment is far dirtier and mustier than they imagined. However, Yijun doesn't seem concerned about the untidiness, as he is preparing to move. Hanjo winces in horror, noting that the apartment looks more like a warehouse than a home and has a strong odor. Yijun explains that the smell is due to a nearby sewer leak. Jinna touches the wall, which is covered in black mold, and tears well up in her eyes at the thought of Yijun living alone in such conditions. Hanjo notices Jinna trembling with emotion and decides to help Yijun with the move and start packing boxes. Jinna supports the idea, and Yijun, grateful for their concern and assistance, clarifies if they're sure they want to help, as they might get dirty. They reassure him that it's nothing. As they head to the parking lot, Hanjo is surprised to see a Ferrari. His attention is immediately drawn to the latest model of the car. He wonders what such a luxurious vehicle is doing in this place. Hanjo wants to take a closer look but feels embarrassed in front of his colleagues. Noticing Hanjo's interest, Yijun calmly approaches the Ferrari and suggests they load the boxes into it. Hanjo and Jinna are speechless at the unexpected offer. Initially, Hanjo thinks Yijun rented the car for the move, but when Yijun says it's his, Hanjo breaks into a cold sweat from the shock. The two can only think that Yijun must have inherited a fortune, as they can't imagine where else he would get the money for a car worth 400 million won. Hanjo, however, can only focus on how much he wants to ride in it. Yijun suggests that his colleagues check out the apartment he's moving to. Hanjo and Jinna eagerly agree, curious to see Yijun's new residence. However, there is only one passenger seat in the Ferrari, meaning only one of them can ride with him. Jinna assumes she'll have to go separately because she's the youngest, but just as she's about to offer, Hanjo surprises her by saying he'll go separately instead. Jinna is taken aback by Hanjo's offer, but he explains that he still needs to pick up his car. He walks to his car, promising to follow Yijun and Jinna. As he leaves, Hanjo cries a little, wishing he could ride in the Ferrari too, but he made this decision to let Jinna spend time with the one she likes. As Yijun and Jinna drive off, Yijun remarks that it's the first time they've been alone together since the trip to Busan. Jinna reveals that her parents thought Yijun was the man she planned to marry soon. In response, Yijun teases her, asking if he should play the role of her husband, which causes Jinna to blush deeply. Embarrassed, Jinna isn't sure how to talk about what's on her mind. Yijun notices her awkwardness and chuckles kindly. Jinna brushes it off, not wanting to spoil the moment with difficult questions, even though she's curious to know more about Yijun's ex-wife. Yijun thanks her for the sensitivity and care that she and Hanjo have shown without prying too much. Blushing, Jinna responds that she'll definitely ask questions when Yijun is ready. She tries to find out where he's moving, but Yijun keeps the details a mystery. Meanwhile, there's a phone conversation between the company director and an unknown woman. The woman says she's sorting through old things and looks at some photos. One of these photos depicts Siwoo and Yijun at their wedding. The woman's fingers aggressively crumple the photo as she speaks on the phone. It turns out to be Siwoo herself. Yijun Jun's ex-wife. 6 months after their divorce, Siwoo decides to return to work at the office where Jun works. Back in the Ferrari, Jun's new car races through the streets, sparkling with cleanliness. This time, Hanjo is driving, having been allowed to do so by Jun, and he is so happy that he's crying. Jun asks him to be careful, jokingly warning him not to kill them both, but Hanjo is too elated to listen. Hanjo has a question for Jun and asks if he can ask it. Jun, surprised, agrees. Hanjo then asks how Jun feels about Jinna. Jun doesn't understand why Hanjo is asking such a sudden question, but Hanjo insists he's just curious. Jun doesn't sense any hidden motives and reflects on how Jinna is kind, capable, and cares about others, a good person overall. Hanjo tries to find out if that's all Jun feels, but Jun isn't sure what else Hanjo wants to hear. At work, senior colleagues start bombarding Jun with questions about his new car during breaks. Everyone noticed the Ferrari in the parking lot and assumed that Jun had made a fortune from his investments. Jun explains that he increased his capital by reinvesting his earnings and mortgaging his property. His colleagues, on the other hand, lost some of their money on bitcoins, so they turned to Jun for advice as a more successful investor. They believe that Jun must be an expert on investments and that he has new plans in mind. However, Jun is unsure what to tell them, whether to create a cover story or reveal the whole truth. He eventually tells them that to invest successfully, you need to have the heart of a beast. Though this advice confuses his colleagues, they interpret it in their own way, deciding that psychology, not technique, is the key to investing. The manager then asks if Jun invests in other types of cryptocurrencies. After buying a house and a car, Jun reinvested the rest of his assets in cryptocurrency, including Ripple and Ethereum. He's hesitant to give investment advice, fearing responsibility for the outcomes. Jun chose these cryptocurrencies because Ripple supports international transactions between banks, and Ethereum uses blockchain technology. He believes both will attract media and investor attention, having studied the subject seriously. Meanwhile, Jinna cleans the women's restroom, thinking of Jun. She overhears other women gossiping about Jun and his new Ferrari. They speculate that he must have taken out loans or is involved in gambling and drinking. One woman expresses disappointment, having thought Jun was more respectable. Annoyed by the slander, Jinna approaches the group, radiating a dark and threatening energy, and demands to know who's spreading the rumors. The women are startled by her sudden intervention. At the same time, Jun's ex-wife, Siwoo, comes to the office where he works. She asks the manager about Jun, but the manager tries to dissuade her, offering to pass along the message instead. Just then, Jun enters with boxes full of documents. As the boxes tilt, Siwoo catches them, and Jun thanks her, only to realize who she is. Panic washes over him as he recognizes his ex-wife. Siwoo warns him to be more careful in the office and asks how he's doing, but Jun doesn't trust her, recalling painful memories of their honeymoon when she scolded him for booking a hotel that didn't suit her. Throughout their marriage, Siwoo belittled him, making him feel guilty, and convinced him that he was lucky she married him. Siwoo believes she still has control over Jun, but he's no longer the man he used to be. Even though their meeting rattles him, he remains calm. Siwoo says she has some documents to give him, and with a long sigh, Jun slams the boxes on the floor, startling her. Colleagues turn to see what's happening as Jun, with newfound confidence, takes the documents from Siwoo and leaves, pretending the encounter didn't affect him. Siwoo is enraged by his reaction, biting her lips to suppress her anger in front of his colleagues. She leaves the office, fuming over how much Jun has changed since their divorce. She regrets not staying with him longer to claim the Ferrari and is determined to create another opportunity. Siwoo returns to her office in tears, looking miserable. Her colleagues rush to comfort her, but the head of the department sees through her act, sighing at Siwoo's pretense. Jun, meanwhile, quietly works in his office, reflecting on the encounter. He knew Siwoo would return to work eventually, and while he wondered how he would feel when they met again, it wasn't as bad as he feared. The manager approaches Jun and asks if he's okay, then invites him to the rooftop. There, the manager hugs him, thanking Jun for the investment advice that led to a significant profit. Jun is confused until he checks the cryptocurrency quotes and discovers that Ripple has risen by 70% since the morning. He wonders how much his assets are worth now, calculating that he has about $98 million. His colleagues, who also invested in Ripple, earn several years' worth of salaries. They thank Jun, but he insists that their success is their own responsibility. When asked how much he invested in Ripple, Jun, not wanting to reveal the truth, claims he invested $1 billion in Ripple and Ethereum. Everyone is shocked at how much he invested and earned. Rumors quickly spread throughout the company that Jun hit the jackpot with cryptocurrency. His success at such a a young age becomes the talk of the office, with people noting how his colleagues are also making successful investments by following his lead. However, someone has been spreading bad rumors about Yi-jun, claiming he beat his ex-wife and took money from her. Si-woo overhears his colleagues discussing how someone is trying to smear Yi-jun's reputation and is furious that her plan is failing and people are defending Yi-jun instead of condemning him. Frustrated, she almost reveals her presence but quickly leaves, leaving only a crumpled drink cup behind. Lunchtime arrives, and Jinna sits thoughtfully by the window in a cafe, looking out as if waiting for someone. The men in the cafe openly admire her, but she seems nervous and agitated, her face pale. Hanjo enters the cafe, carrying a tray with the drinks. He calls Jinna by name and asks how long she's been waiting, but she says she just arrived. Hanjo had asked her to meet him at the cafe to discuss something special about Yi-jun. He wants to ask her a question first and then talk about the rest. Hanjo asks Jinna what she thinks about the recent rumors concerning Yi-jun's gambling addiction and alleged abuse of his ex-wife. Jinna sharply exclaims that all these rumors are ridiculous, and she doesn't believe them at all. Someone is spreading them maliciously. This answer satisfies Hanjo, and he decides to clarify something else with her. Finally, Hanjo asks Jinna if she's in love with Yi-jun. This causes Jinna to blush profusely and become speechless with embarrassment. She stammers, trying to deny Hanjo's words, but he chuckles and asks her not to pretend. He understands everything and wants to help. Hanjo tells her to go to Yi-jun right now and confess her feelings. Meanwhile, Yi-jun is on another break, receiving hugs from satisfied colleagues. Trusting Yi-jun's instincts, his colleagues decided to hold off on selling their assets and didn't lose out. Yi-jun isn't entirely happy, as more and more people are thanking him. Colleagues began to express their gratitude because, thanks to Yi-jun's advice, they managed to solve their financial difficulties. After the rumors about Yi-jun hitting the jackpot, most of the company's employees got involved in the cryptocurrency game. Soon, everyone who trusted Yi-jun and invested in Ripple made a huge profit. Colleagues start calling Yi-jun a financial god and confess their admiration for him. One colleague tries to figure out how much Yi-jun has earned, but he tries to avoid revealing the truth. Currently, Yi-jun has 578 billion won in his account. With that kind of money, he could buy almost any company. When Yi-jun invested in new cryptocurrencies, he anticipated their prices would rise, but he couldn't have imagined the situation would become so crazy within a month. He counted on human greed, but the growth is still too rapid. The women in the office also join their colleagues in seeking investment advice from Yi-jun. He warns them that it's a bit risky to invest right now, as the prices have skyrocketed recently and could drop significantly. The women thank him for the advice and ask about other investment opportunities. Si-woo is infuriated by the attention Yi-jun is receiving. Out of irritation, she locks herself in the bathroom and kicks the trash can. Si-woo is angry that everyone praises someone she believes is a fool. Her pride is hurt, and she devises a plan to destroy Yi-jun's reputation and get his money. Yi-jun, on the other hand, calmly checks his phone, seeing that everyone is discussing cryptocurrency. However, he suddenly receives a notification that shocks him. Si-woo writes to him as if nothing happened between them, saying she was wrong and asking him out on a date. Yi-jun considers deleting the message, but then Jinna calls him. He immediately answers, curious about the reason for her call. Jinna, worried, says nothing special happened. She's just at home in her pajamas, hugging a plush toy, and wanted to talk to him. Yi-jun asks if Jinna is resting, and she replies that she just got back from training. Yi-jun mentions his plans to go shopping the next day since he threw away his old furniture. Jinna eagerly offers to join him on the shopping trip. Yi-jun hesitates to answer, making Jinna anxious, but after a few seconds, he agrees to meet her at the mall in the afternoon. They wish each other goodnight, and Jinna screams in delight into her pillow, trying to calm herself. At the wrong time, she remembers her conversation with Hanjo and how he urged her to confess. Jinna isn't sure if she'll be able to do it, but she's determined to try. The next day, Yi-jun hurries to the mall, arriving early and sighing heavily as he waits for Jinna. He considers waiting at a cafe, but then Jinna calls out to him. She also arrived early, eager to see Yi-jun. She's beaming with joy, and the men around them can't help but notice. Yi-jun observes that Jinna is calling him informally, which he allows her to do at work as well. Jinna then invites him to go inside the mall, secretly admiring him. She's thrilled that Yi-jun agreed to take her on this outing. The two of them start shopping for the furniture Yi-jun needs. Meanwhile, Siwoo is waiting for Yijun in a cafe, fuming that he's late, not realizing he has no plans to show up. Back at the mall, the employees politely greet Yijun and Jinna. Jinna notices that this is the first time she's alone with Yijun outside of work and imagines it could be a date. Suddenly, Yijun draws her attention to something, inviting her to take a look. He's excited about finding new blankets, especially soft ones, as he's used to only thick and heavy blankets. Enthusiastically, he decides to buy 3 sets of blankets at once. Before he can make the purchase, something else catches his eye. A new cordless vacuum cleaner. Then, there's a refrigerator with a touchscreen on the door. He also spots a washer and dryer, important elements for his new home. Lastly, Yijun is drawn to a sofa with an adjustable recline angle. For the first time in his life, Yijun spends money without thinking, and this makes him happy. He admits that the mall is an interesting place when you're rich. Yijun feels like he's turned on a cheat code in a game, like when he was a child. He decides to ask Jinna if she's bored with going shopping with him, but she is delighted. However, in addition to the fun, Jinna feels many other strange emotions, mainly because of Hanjo's words that she is obliged to confess her feelings to Yijun. She understands that she really can't hesitate forever and wants to try to tell Yijun everything. But when she begins to confess, Yijun interrupts her. They both shudder with embarrassment and look into each other's eyes. Jinna suggests that Yijun speak first, but he insists that she go ahead. However, she still persuades him to speak first. Yijun's words make Jinna stare at him in surprise. She even asks if Yijun really means what he said. All this time, sitting in a cafe waiting for Yijun, Siwoo clenches her fists in fury because he did not come to the meeting. During the next break at work, the office employees rejoice at the rise in Ripple's value. The men cheer loudly for themselves and each other. Yijun observes the scene, noting that even more people are now investing in cryptocurrency. One of the loudest cheerers is a man who used to ridicule cryptocurrency, calling it a form of gambling. However, in addition to the rise in Ripple, the price of Ethereum is also soaring, which makes Yijun very happy. He thinks that huge profits from cryptocurrency can turn even those who criticized it into fanatics. Greed, according to Yijun, unites people, but no one knows the end result. In happy moments, investments can bring huge profits, but if the price falls, a person can lose everything. And when the losses begin, you end up in a personal hell. Yijun admits that he is no exception and has to obey these rules as well. Even his father taught him that winning at the gaming table doesn't mean getting money. Money can come at a completely different point in time. Yijun believes that one must overcome greed and wake up because you only get money when you get up from the gaming table. In work chats, they discuss investments and thank Yijun for his valuable advice. This infuriates his colleague, James, who has long considered cryptocurrency an unworthy business. James believes that Yijun is just lucky and doesn't really understand anything. James is convinced that he is the only one engaged in real investing. He is pleased that he earned 100 million won in a month and believes his life will soon turn upside down. James dreams of buying a luxury apartment overlooking the Han River and a sports car. James also wants to marry Jinna, with whom he has been in love for a long time. In the chat, Yijun makes an important statement about cryptocurrency. He says that he is going to sell everything. A senior colleague thinks this is foolish because Yijun could earn much more. James aggressively types messages in the chat, declaring that Yijun's words are complete nonsense, and no one should sell cryptocurrency now. James believes that if Yijun decides to miss out on such a benefit, then he is a complete amateur. Yijun replies to some of the messages, but he doesn't try to persuade anyone. After that, he puts his phone aside and thinks about his next step. Now, he wants to meet with his boss to discuss an important issue. Yijun goes to work in an office that is in the mood for a serious conversation. He goes up to the right floor and approaches his manager, asking if the manager has a minute to talk. The manager notices a roll of paper in Yijun's hands and realizes that Yijun wants to tell him something really important. Sighing heavily, he thinks that the conversation will be about a resignation, so he invites Yijun to go to another place, the roof, where they usually take breaks. The manager congratulates Yijun on his increased wealth. After all, Yijun had been rich before, and now he is supposed to be even richer, and the manager himself earned enough for drinking for the rest of his life. He decides to push Yijun to talk about what's on his mind. Yijun nervously clutches the papers in his hands and starts the conversation. The manager doesn't want to say goodbye to a good employee who also gives sound advice. Yijun then asks for a 2-week vacation and asks if it's possible to take it. The news that the application in Yijun's hands is for a vacation and not for a resignation pleases the manager. The manager had thought that since Yijun made so much money, he might be ready to retire. But Yijun isn't ready for that yet. He hadn't even thought of resigning. He recalls his meeting with Jinna, telling her that he planned to go to the States for about 2 weeks. He thinks about what to do with the money he's earned and decides that he needs to gain more experience and knowledge. Yijun wants to take the opportunity to study a little in America. Because of his decision, Jinna is hesitant to confess her feelings to him and only wishes Yijun a good time on the trip. The manager agrees to sign Yijun's vacation papers. Yijun asks his senior colleague if he can continue to live like this. He has made a lot of money from cryptocurrency, but he doesn't know what to do next. He doesn't have a hobby or a dream because he never had time to think about it before. Yijun realizes that he has always been jealous of people who have dreams, those who pursued singing professionally and enjoyed being on stage, those who were involved in sports from a young age and built their careers on it, and those who spent their time painting. These people had dreams and passions that he didn't have. The manager says that not everyone can have a dream, and not having one is as normal as being an ordinary person. Yijun had never thought about it that way and didn't know that it could be normal. The manager shares that, as a child, he dreamed of becoming a professional golfer. His parents, who loved golf, supported him, and from the age of 10, he was preparing to become a professional with their encouragement. He had injured himself more than once, and his hands were covered with bruises and calluses. But as a child, it was enough for him just to hold a club in his hands, and he was happy because of his dream. However, he soon discovered the hidden costs behind that dream. He learned that a lot of money had been spent on tuition and use of the golf course, which was ruining his family. As a result, he gave up on his dream. But now, he lives quite well and has another dream that he strives to make come true, to go to a baseball game with his family. He advises Yijun not to get too hung up on having a dream. He'll be able to get everything he wants in life. The manager suggests that Yijun enjoy life and do what he wants. Yijun respectfully listens to his senior colleague's words and draws conclusions for himself. He decides to move step by step to formulate new dreams. The manager, still curious, finally asks Yijun how much money he actually earned. He promises to keep the information secret. Instead of answering directly, Yijun asks how much an apartment in the Gangnam district costs nowadays. After mentally calculating, he whispers the final number in the manager's ear. The manager is so shocked by the answer that he breaks out in a sweat. He incredulously asks if Yijun really has such wealth. The manager smiles, amazed at how ridiculously rich Yijun is, realizing that Yijun's current assets could be imagined as 1,000 apartments in Gangnam. After receiving his vacation, Yijun sets off on his journey to America. The last time he flew was for a seminar in Germany, but that was a long time ago. Now, he can afford comfortable conditions for the flight. He is warmly greeted by the flight attendant, and Yijun is delighted by the respectful treatment. He has only flown in economy class before, where it was cramped and uncomfortable. Now, for the first time, he flies first class, sitting in a comfortable chair where he can relax. Suddenly, he hears a woman's voice discussing design issues nearby. In the next row sits a beautiful brunette talking on the phone about the development of the automotive industry in Korea. The girl notices Yijun watching her without any embarrassment. He waves at her as a sign of greeting. His neighbor ends her business conversation with a request to send documents by email in case of urgency, and apologizes to Yijun for talking on the phone in the cabin. But the man is understanding. After studying Yijun with her eyes, the stranger finds him quite amusing. She hands Yijun a business card and introduces herself as the executive director of an automobile company. Her name is Sophia. Yijun is surprised that Sophia is so young and already an executive director. He introduces himself to her but mentions that he didn't bring business cards. Sophia is puzzled by his position, as she didn't think an ordinary employee could afford to travel first class. Yijun almost immediately explains that his capital mainly depends on investments. On the plane, Yijun and Sophia are served a great lunch, steak and wine. In Yijun's eyes, the food literally glows, and his mouth waters in anticipation. He cuts a juicy steak with a knife and takes a bite. The taste of the dish shocks him from the first bite. Yijun has never eaten something so delicious. He squeezes his eyes shut with pleasure, delighted with the combination of meat juices and sauce. He also enjoys the wine, and overall, the meal is a pleasant surprise for him. As Sophia eats her portion quite calmly, Yijun wonders if he can ask for more wine. Sophia still doesn't understand where an ordinary employee gets the money to fly first class. Yijun notices that his neighbor is watching him very carefully. Their eyes meet, and Sophia feels uneasy that her surveillance has been discovered. Yijun unexpectedly compliments her on her good posture, which surprises Sophia. He says that he was watching her because of her confident posture and her skillful handling of a fork and knife. Sophia is very embarrassed by such detailed compliments, but she quickly calms down and is pleased by the attention. Yijun examines an image of a beautiful girl standing next to a car. It's part of a concept for a car ad for the company Sophia runs, and he finds it interesting. The girl enthusiastically explains that they create cars for both the Korean and American markets, and wonders what kind of car Yijun himself drives. When she learns that he owns a Ferrari, she becomes even more curious about who her neighbor really is. Meanwhile, Sophia talks about her plans for sports and electronic cars. Yijun remembers that he has driven cars from her company before. The girl is very interested in hearing his feedback, but when he criticizes some technical features, she feels awkward. Apparently, Sophia did not expect such detailed comments about the shortcomings. Yijun notices how much he has changed, realizing that he would not have expressed his thoughts so boldly before. He reflects on the confidence that his money has given him. To defuse the situation, he remarks that Sophia seems to have a great passion for cars, and she responds that it has been her hobby since childhood. She loves driving different cars, and in the UK, she recently had an interesting experience with a Mini. Sophia actively talks about her impressions, and Yijun thinks about how nice it is to see someone who is passionate about their work. However, throughout the flight, Sophia repeatedly bombards him with various information about cars. Yijun, unable to rest from her chatter during the flight, is very relieved to arrive at San Francisco Airport. He and Sophia shake hands, and she asks him to contact her when he returns to Korea. Sophia smiles and wishes Yijun a good trip. Pretty exhausted, Yijun wishes her all the best in return. After taking his luggage, he finally leaves the San Francisco airport. He finds himself in an unfamiliar environment and opens his mouth in surprise, looking at people of different races and with different skin colors. He finally realizes that he is really in America. Suddenly, someone behind him loudly calls out his name. Yijun turns around and sees Han Sha, his old friend, running towards him. The men shake hands and joke with each other. Han Sha is Yijun's closest friend, who shared all the hardships with him when they lived together during college. After that, Han Sha managed to move to the States and settle down here, and America has changed him quite a lot. Han Sha invites Yijun to lunch, and Yijun is surprised when Han Sha manages to book a table, to which Han Sha laughs, saying that you have to eat hamburgers in America. Meanwhile, in Korea, Siwoo tries to calm her anger at dinner, aggressively stabbing her salad with a fork. She is furious that Yijun is not only ignoring her but also managing to cheat on her. She almost growls, upset that she had to give up her pride and write to her ex-husband, whom she despises. When colleagues ask her what happened, Siwoo jokes that she is just thinking about her ex-husband. She then immediately starts saying the worst things she can think of about Yijun, intertwining stories of gambling debts, infidelity, and domestic violence. However, she is immediately interrupted by a manager from her department, who points out that Siwoo is the one paying too much attention to Yijun. The manager smirks, noting with surprise that if she broke up with someone, the story would end there. She hints to their colleagues that they shouldn't trust Siwoo's words, and Siwoo nearly explodes from the insinuation. The manager adds that she tried to stay out of their personal lives before, but the rumors Siwoo spreads don't match up with Yijun's reputation within the company. She openly accuses Siwoo of being jealous and trying to ruin Yijun's life. Siwoo is initially speechless from such a rebuff and doesn't know how to respond. However, her acting abilities kick in, and she immediately starts crying loudly, rushing out of the office. The manager rolls her eyes at this behavior and sighs. In a rage, Siwoo runs into the women's restroom to avoid screaming in the office. She kicks a trash can and curses the manager, but she decides to ignore it and endure the situation further. Siwoo also got caught up in the fever for buying Ripple and managed to make good money on it. She is certain that she will get very rich and have the last laugh. Meanwhile, Yijun's colleague, who was the loudest about not selling Ripple, brags at lunchtime that he was right. He mocks Yijun's skills, calling him cowardly for not making more money. James convinces his colleagues not to sell but to buy more Ripple and tells them to trust him. Colleagues from Yijun's office watch Jack's outburst from the sidelines. One of them, who was worried when Yijun sold his assets, doesn't know what to do next as profits continue to grow. He struggles with greed all day long, thinking about investments as the quotes rise. In response, the manager calmly declares that he sold all the Ripple he had in his assets. This shocks his colleague, since investments are bringing huge profits every day, but the manager simply shrugs, explaining that he trusts Yijun, who took the bold step of selling. In response to the younger colleague's suspicious look, he philosophically notes that cryptocurrency will continue to grow regardless of people's actions, and you can always buy more. But selling assets that are increasing in value at the right time requires skill, so when Yijun said he was selling all of his assets, the manager felt confident to do the same. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Yijun and Han Sha are sitting in a burger joint when a cute waitress brings them their order. Yijun really enjoys the burgers from the first bite, and Han Sha is pleased with his reaction. Han Sha sympathizes with Ijun's expensive trip but promises to make his stay as comfortable as possible. Ijun is touched that his friend is willing to take care of him, even though he knows nothing about Ijun's financial situation. Suddenly, someone calls out to them while they're having lunch, and Han Sha turns toward the source of the sound. They are approached by a guy and a girl of non-Asian appearance, both blonde and speaking English without an accent. In America, Han Sha is sometimes called by his nickname, but he doesn't mind, as it sounds cool. The newcomers are Henry and Elena, and Han Sha became friends with them after moving to the States. They sit down to eat together and discuss Hensha's work projects, which have made a significant contribution to the automotive industry. Han Sha developed software for self-driving cars, while Henry is the founder of a startup in this field, working on an autonomous driving system for trucks. Elena also has her own startup company, designing and manufacturing clothes and shoes from environmentally friendly materials. Ijun is delighted that both of his new acquaintances are CEOs, and they discuss how opening a startup is like climbing a snow-capped mountain, trying to implement your idea by any means and overcoming obstacles of varying complexity. But when the idea finally takes shape, it feels like it was all worth it. Ijun admits that he respects Henry and Elena very much for their courage, looking at them with admiration. Henry replies that ideas are good, but they need talented people like Han Sha to bring them to life, as his programming skills can implement any concept. However, he immediately teases Han Sha, noting his great love for hamburgers. Watching their playful banter, Ijun is pleased to note that even though he has just arrived in America, he's already met the founders of promising companies. He feels that his trip to the States is already justified by such an interesting experience. In the evening, they arrive at Hensha's apartment, located in an ordinary apartment building. It's clean and well-furnished, which surprises Ijun, who learns that the rent for such housing is about 4 million won, or a little more than $3,000. Han Sha explains that real estate in the United States is more expensive than in Korea, especially in San Francisco. He opens the refrigerator and throws a can of beer to Ijun, suggesting they rinse their mouths after eating and discuss Ijun's plans for the trip. Han Sha knows his friend too well to understand that Ijun wouldn't come to the States without a reason. Ijun smiles contentedly, glad that his friend still understands him well. As they sip beer, the men discuss what has happened during the years of their separation. Han Sha is very happy about Ijun's divorce from Siwoo, whom he never liked. Ijun regrets going through the experience, but Han Sha notes that it made him stronger. Han Sha is glad that his friend has become more confident. He mentions that in America, many have hit the jackpot with cryptocurrency, and some even create it themselves to enrich themselves. Han Sha suggests that Ijun create his own cryptocurrency, and Ijun becomes interested in the idea. However, Ijun has another plan and asks Han Sha for help. Han Sha is curious about how he can support his old friend. Ijun reveals that he wants to start his own company. Han Sha initially thinks this idea came from too much drinking, but Ijun became seriously interested in starting his own company after meeting Henry and Elena. To explain the potential pitfalls, Han Sha talks about 3 important components of startups. The first component is capital, that is, cash and other assets. The second is a unique idea that would make the startup stand out in the market. And the third is the abilities of the creator and representative of the startup. Even with money and an idea, the director can destroy the project without the ability to manage it, and vice versa. Having abilities but lacking initial capital can lead to failure. Ijun reflects on what qualities a CEO needs, considering whether they include professionalism, intelligence, and energy. According to Han Sha, it's not easy to run a company, and if you have money, it's better to invest it wisely. His friend's words make Ijun reconsider his life strategy, and he decides to ask Han Sha how to invest in companies correctly. After a detailed discussion of all the intricacies, the next day, Ijun and Han Sha set up a business meeting at a burger joint. They invite Henry, whom Ijun recognizes from the day before. During the conversation, Henry learns that Ijun has decided to invest in his startup. The men laugh at the fact that choosing a burger restaurant as a place for a business meeting is a definite American decision. They discuss Henry's startup, and Ijun gathers all the information he needs. It turns out that the company has high growth and technological capabilities and has already received an investment offer from a large Korean corporation. Henry tries to insist that they have many offers, but Ijun believes he is actually hesitant. Such an observation surprises the American, and he stutters at Ijun's words. Companies interested in Henry's startup demand good terms for themselves, but unfair ones for Henry. Ijun, on the other hand, wants to partner with the startup, not absorb it. His initial offer to buy 10% of the shares for $500,000 shocks the American. Offering his investment terms, Yijun seems confident in his capabilities. After listening to him, Henry wants to check the paperwork first to make sure Yijun can afford the investment at this time. Han Sha is eating burgers quite calmly, confident in the success of the deal. Henry carefully examines the papers, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. As a result, he offers to sell Yijun 10% of the shares for $700,000. Han Sha immediately jumps into the conversation and asks Henry not to inflate the price because he originally wanted $400,000. When Henry asks him not to interfere with the negotiations, Han Sha points out that he was the one who advised Yijun to invest in his friend's startup. He makes his offer of 20% of the shares for $900,000. Han Sha knows very well that due to the development of new technology, Henry has an acute shortage of capital. A large Korean company wants to take over his startup, and if they don't come to an agreement, Henry will simply lose the right to run his business. He assures his American friend that Yijun will not do the same. He will take part of the shares as part of a fair investment deal and will not interfere in the management of the company. Therefore, he recommends that Henry carefully consider their offer and see a great benefit in it. Henry swallows nervously in response to his words but realizes that he has no choice. He holds out his hand to Yijun for a shake and announces that they are now partners. Yijun, as an investor, will look forward to the company's growth. When they go outside and he looks at the signed papers, he thinks that regardless of the results, this is a good experience. He is very grateful to Han Sha for his help and support in a new business for him. Han Sha's knowledge is much more extensive than he expected, and he is well versed in the internal affairs of companies. Therefore, Yijun decides to repay him for the opportunity. He talks about his strong love for his friend, but Han Sha only brushes it off in embarrassment. Yijun asks him to recommend a few more companies to invest in. Han Sha laughs that he can't stop thinking about work, and Yijun really thinks about how things are in the office. Meanwhile, Sophia, who was on a plane with Yijun, learns that an American startup has rejected their investment offer. It turns out that it was her company that wanted to absorb Henry's business. An employee of her company reports that their plan failed. The girl is stunned that Henry sold the shares to a new investor, but Henry is not the only one, as several other companies preferred to work with a private investor rather than with Sophia's company. The girl frowns upon hearing that this unknown investor is one person. Usually, she is more perceptive, but here she managed not to know some major player in the investment market. She orders her employee to find out as much as possible about this investor in order to buy his shares. Now Sophia's goal is to find her rival, but she does not yet suspect that Yijun is it. At the same time, around the world, the price of Ripple begins to fall at a tremendous speed. This drop is actively discussed in Yijun's work chats. Everyone is in a panic. Yijun's colleagues begin to blame James, who persuaded them to invest in Ripple, for their financial losses. The fact that his colleagues urge him to take responsibility makes James feel pressured. Many of the company's employees lost several million in 1 week. This altercation is watched in horror by Siwoo, who also suffered heavy losses, although she boasted so much that she was more successful than Yijun. James immediately starts yelling at the others that they shouldn't have blindly believed his words and that they are to blame for their losses. Everyone is very disappointed in him since the man was very active in forcing everyone to refuse to sell cryptocurrency. One of his colleagues grabs him by the collar and shakes him properly, starting a scuffle. One of the colleagues, who didn't believe Yijun's words and didn't sell the cryptocurrency on time, feels bitter about the defeat. He looks thoughtfully at the sky, trying not to despair from what is happening. He regrets that he succumbed to a fit of greed and did not listen to the advice of his friend. He decides to sell all his assets now while there is at least some chance to make money and not completely fall into despair. He sighs dreamily, curious about what Yijun is doing while they are going through difficult times. At the same time, Yijun is hiding in a destroyed building, reloading his pistol. He is covered in sweat and dust, breathing heavily and listening to the footsteps outside. There are several such buildings on a large territory, so he hopes that he will not be found immediately. But the enemies are close, and he is forced to open fire to protect himself. He yells at Han Sha behind him that if this continues, they're both dead. But Han Sha is already lying almost dead, face down on the ground. He apologizes to Yijun for not being able to help him and for letting him down. Before Yijun can rush to him, he receives a series of shots in the back. He falls to the ground next to Han Sha, who screams and calls his name. The man who shot Yijun in the back stands behind them for quite a while, watching the men. Suddenly, he pulls out another weapon from behind his back, which turns out to be a frying pan. He begins to beat Yijun and Han Sha on the ground with a frying pan, forcing them to fully admit defeat. As a result, the exhausted and beaten men can only lie down and regret what happened. It turns out that all this time Yijun and Han Sha have have been playing a computer game. Yi-jun is very happy that his friend Han Sha helped him invest in several startups. In gratitude, he decided to give a new apartment to the person who supported him so much. At first, Han Sha refused, assuring Yi-jun that he did not help him out of self-interest. However, Yi-jun found a way to change his mind and show his appreciation. The apartment he gave Han Sha was furnished with the latest technology. It had a powerful computer, various game consoles, and slot machines. Such an apartment could not help but win over a man at first sight. Therefore, Han Sha accepted it on the condition that Yi-jun would continue to live with him. During another game, Yi-jun tells his friend that he is thinking of going on a trip to America. Han Sha is surprised at the length of his friend's vacation, but it turns out that Yi-jun has agreed with his boss and extended it. Han Sha doesn't usually get to travel, but he thinks Yi-jun's idea sounds interesting. Suddenly, a thought comes to his mind that he urgently wants to share with Yi-jun. He asks his friend to do him a favor, and Yi-jun agrees without even knowing what it is. Smiling slightly, Han Sha explains that his request is related to Yi-jun's journey. Yi-jun regrets agreeing to his friend's request. From the very beginning, he planned just to go on a trip to one of the cities, but now he has a companion, a lovely American named Rose. Yi-jun can't relax on the bus because Rose uses him as a pillow. Rose is the younger sister of Hench's colleague, and it was he who asked Yi-jun to take her on the trip. She is 23 years old and has just graduated from college. He asks Yi-jun to take care of his sister, and Yi-jun is very embarrassed by this. He is distracted from thoughts of unexpected difficulties by Rose's insistent voice. She leans against the window, very excited that they have reached their destination, which is sunny Los Angeles. A lot of attention is paid to their company as the beautiful Rose attracts people's eyes, but Rose's attention is absorbed by Yi-jun, who, like herself, found himself in Los Angeles for the first time. Rose is very excited and looking forward to new experiences. Yi-jun is surprised by the girl's easy attitude to traveling alone with a man. He decides that this is because Rose is American. It is also possible that, due to the fact that the girl is younger than him, she may consider Yi-jun to be something of an uncle. Noticing that Yi-jun is deep in his thoughts, Rose actively waves her hand in front of his face. She loudly calls his name, forcing him to listen to her. Yi-jun is embarrassed that he didn't hear a word and apologizes to an annoyed Rose. The American says that since Yi-jun has no travel plans, they will follow her schedule. Yi-jun agrees to everything Rose has come up with for the trip. Rose has already thought out a whole program with a visit to many attractions. For example, they visit the Warner Brothers film studio and take a lot of pictures in various locations. They also go to the pier during sunset. After asking one of the people to take a picture of them, they pose together for a picture as a souvenir. After walking for a day, Yi-jun and Rose decide to have dinner at a restaurant. They order food and wine to celebrate their trip and raise their glasses in a toast. Rose hopes that Yi-jun wasn't too embarrassed to take her with him for company, and Yi-jun replies that he enjoyed spending time with her. He understands that he would not have explored the sights so much on his own. The young people discuss the purpose of Yi-jun's trip to America, and the man talks about his desire to expand his knowledge and get acquainted with a new culture. Rose says that she wanted to get good memories before getting a job, so she planned the trip. The American studied hard and was able to find a job on Wall Street, and therefore she has the last opportunity to spend time carefree. Yi-jun is amazed that such a young girl has already been able to find a job on the main financial street of the world. In the wake of such amazing discoveries, Yi-jun wants to drink another glass. He woos Rose and gallantly fills her glass with wine. He wishes Rose to fulfill her goal of working with really big money and to find and fulfill her dream. Rose listens attentively to Yi-jun's wishes and smiles contentedly. The two touch glasses, and Yi-jun expresses his wish to one day turn to Rose as an important financier on Wall Street. After dinner, they check into the hostel where they are staying and are surprised that there is no one else in the room except them. Rose expresses the idea that even in such places there are not always people. She puts her suitcase against the wall and slowly sinks onto her bed. She then looks playfully at Yi-jun and expresses her joy that they are alone. Yi-jun shudders at such frank flirtation and freezes in place. His gaze involuntarily slides over the seductive body of the girl, but before his thoughts lead him too far, he coughs embarrassingly and asks her not to joke with him like that to defuse the situation. After a while, they turn off the lights and settle down on a bunk bed, after which Rose wishes Yi-jun good night from the second tier. He politely wishes her good dreams as well, but he is still excited. Rose's flirtation almost made Yi-jun's heart jump out of his chest. As an Asian, he was not used to such an overt display of interest, and therefore it was difficult for him to pretend to be calm. He couldn't deny that Rose was a very beautiful girl, but she was the sister of Hench's girlfriend, and he didn't want to get him in trouble. So, he decided to just continue to treat Rose like a travel companion companion and take her to the pool bar the next day. People in bathing suits relaxed both in the water and at the bar. Rose, who came to the bar, attracted many glances because of her beauty. However, she did not pay attention to the people and hurried to approach Yijun, who was resting on a sun lounger. Yijun looked embarrassed at his companion, who, upon approaching him, took off her towel. The girl stayed in a swimsuit, which very favorably emphasized the curves of her body. She leaned closer to an embarrassed Yijun and suggested that he go swimming. The girl actively splashed in the water and easily swam across the pool. Yijun, meanwhile, sat on the side and just immersed his feet in the water. Even emerging from the pool, Rose looked very impressive. She was pleased with the pleasant swim and happily approached Yijun. Yijun told her that he didn't really know how to swim, so he preferred to just rinse his feet lightly. Rose immediately offered to teach Yijun how to swim and pulled him into the water. Yijun tried to refuse and was covered with embarrassment. He understood that if Rose continued to show him signs of attention, he would definitely be carried away by her, so he tried to keep his distance. Yijun still politely tried to refuse and said that he wanted to return to the hotel. Suddenly, 3 guys approached them from behind and rudely discussed Rose's beauty out loud. One of the guys suggested that Rose drop Yijun and play with them. Yijun looked at the guys who were trying to roll up to Rose, who was frowning at this. Suddenly, he noticed that one of the trio was not paying attention to Rose. On the contrary, as soon as he caught Yijun's eye, he winked at him. Yijun was horrified when he realized that they were trying to roll up to him as well. The guys continued to actively call Rose to go with them to the bar. She refused because she already had company, and the guys laughed at it. She told the guys to leave as soon as possible before she called the guards, and this caused them to become aggressive. One of the guys tried to forcibly grab Rose's hand, dissatisfied with her threats. Yijun immediately rushed forward and intercepted his arm, preventing him from touching Rose. He stood in front of Rose and convinced the strangers that they should not touch the girl without her consent. Rose was impressed that Yijun behaved like a true gentleman. She was embarrassed by the feelings that overwhelmed her at the sight of the man's broad back. Meanwhile, Yijun was worried about what to do next because, although he decided to protect the girl, he was not used to fighting. The guys disgruntledly exchanged words with each other and wanted to start a conflict. Though Yijun was still trying to shield Rose with himself, she gently pushed him aside. She calmly and boldly went forward to the strange young men, crossing her arms over her chest. She ordered them to apologize and leave, then they would pretend that nothing happened. The guys didn't understand why they should apologize if they hadn't done anything wrong. Rose was pleased with the answer, but the smile on her lips looked quite threatening. She immediately drew the attention of those who molested them to the person behind their backs. It turned out to be the local guard. He reminded the guys that they had already been warned about the harassment of customers, which was why they would have to move out of the hotel. Several more colleagues joined the guard, and they quickly took the molester away. On this occasion, Yijun and Rose decided to have a cocktail at the bar. They were delighted with the bar and the taste of the drinks, which made the bartender smile contentedly. Coupons for free drinks were given to them as compensation from the hotel. Yijun considered this to be luck, and Rose could not disagree with him. The girl thoughtfully lowered her gaze into the glass with the drink and turned to her companion. She was curious to know more about Yijun and asked him to tell her about himself, his family, and his life in the past. Yijun thought about the answer and said that his mother died early, and he lived for a long time with his father, who loved gambling and ruined them. Eventually, his father died as well. He told the story of how he graduated from college, got a job in a company, and married a woman who worked in a neighboring department. After hearing the story of Yijun and Siwu lives, Rose went into a rage. She called Yijun's ex-wife a witch and scolded her loudly for the pain she caused the man. Yijun did not expect that she would scold his ex, but unexpectedly such a reaction turned out to be pleasant for him. Rose immediately noted that she understood why Maria wanted to marry him. She believed that Yijun listened carefully to a woman's words, respected her, and cared about her. Therefore, based on these thoughts, Rose was sure that it was easy to fall in love with him. Yijun felt embarrassment and a pleasant warmth in his chest from the girl's words. In order not to cross the line established between them, Yijun hurries to end the evening and suggests that they go to their rooms. He wearily collapses on the bed, trying to recover from his time alone with Rose. Yijun lies with his arms outstretched, thinking about everything that has happened. He thinks that he should be more conscious because Rose almost knocked him out of his stride. To distract himself, he decides to check the price of cryptocurrency and pulls out his phone. With displeasure, he notes that the prices of many cryptocurrencies have collapsed. He reflects on how big his losses would have been if he hadn't sold his assets. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door, and Yijun is very surprised to see Rose behind it. Yijun thinks that something has happened to her and hurries to open the door. Behind the door of the hotel room stands Rose in a seductive nightgown. Yijun is speechless from what he sees and stops breathing for a few seconds. He nervously asks the girl what happened since she came to him, but Rose suddenly puts a finger on his lips, telling him to shut up. She enters the room and comes close to Yi-jun without embarrassment. Rose is seductive and beautiful, so she literally shines in Yi-jun's eyes. She persuades Yi-jun to spend the night in the same bed, and when they lie down next to each other, she decides to get his opinion on the trip. This time, they are in Las Vegas, and Yi-jun liked it much more than he imagined. He liked Santa Monica Beach for the beauty of nature and Las Vegas for the splendor of a noisy city. Rose laughs at his words. She shares Yi-jun's point of view. The girl suddenly rises on the bed to move closer to Yi-jun. She rolls over on her stomach and puts her hands under her head, asking the man if just talking at night is enough for him. Yi-jun mentally prays not to relapse but replies that the night is good and suitable for talking. Rose wonders why Yi-jun doesn't openly show his sympathy and desire. Yi-jun thinks that he wants to be honest with her. He replies that he is not sure that he is ready for responsibility after intimacy with a woman. After divorcing his wife, he lost interest in dating, but he knows for sure that he does not want consequences if their meaning is only short-term pleasure. He also gently notes that he doesn't particularly want to hurt Rose. The girl blushes at his confession and feels her breath shorten, but to hide her embarrassment, she accuses Yi-jun of being rude. Hiding her face in the pillow, she asks the man to talk to her all night. Yi-jun does not mind, and they begin to share their impressions of the trip together. But in the end, Yi-jun calmly falls asleep in the process of their conversation. Rose examines the sleeping Yi-jun and gently touches his face. Then she carefully rolls up to the man's side and hugs him. She feels a little disappointed, but even such a first night in the same bed makes Rose feel happy. In the morning, they pack their things and go to their final destination, New York. Yi-jun decided to accompany Rose to the city and at the same time see many famous places in New York. He is going to return to Seoul from this city as it is faster than via San Francisco. Yi-jun asks the girl to take care of herself and wishes her good luck in her life and work. Rose rushes to him and hugs him tightly. She thinks traveling with Yi-jun was great and asks him to contact her when he gets home. After promising the girl to contact her later, Yi-jun boards his flight and heads home. Yi-jun sits on the plane and thinks that the long journey to America has finally come to an end. When he came to the States, he met a lot of interesting and good people, from startup executives to the charming Rose. He was also very impressed by the industry and culture flourishing in every corner of the country, and of course, the huge capital. When Yi-jun felt this huge economic low, greed and a desire to join it awoke in him. He realizes that he wants to make even more money because it's the most fun thing there can be. When he lands in Seoul, he suddenly realizes that a familiar face is greeting him at the airport. Hanjo arrives at the airport with a nameplate and calls Yi-jun over. The man is surprised that a colleague came to meet him, and he's not the only one who came to meet Yi-jun. With a soft smile, Jinna approaches the men, glad that after a while, she finally sees Yi-jun. Yi-jun is happy to see her, and Hanjo laughs behind his back at his colleague's reaction. Yi-jun wonders how Jinna was able to come during office hours, but Jinna replies that she was nearby. The colleagues decide that after Yi-jun's trip, he will want to have a snack, and the man agrees and takes them to a good restaurant. At that moment, Yi-jun's phone signals incoming messages from his ex-wife, although he does not pay attention to it. After having a good time with Hanjo and Jinna, Yi-jun finally comes home. He reflects on the fact that American landscapes are good, but nothing compares to his homeland. Before sorting out his luggage, he decides to check the notifications on his phone. He is happy to hear from who invites him to come to America more often. He smiles at Rose's message in which she talks about a successful interview at a large American company. Rose writes that they will see each other soon, and Yi-jun is perplexed about the reasons for a possible meeting. Then he draws attention to the number of messages from his ex-wife, Siwoo. Siwoo breaks the comedy and presents herself as a gentle, suffering wife. She writes how sad she is that he left for the States without telling her anything, how much she misses him, and that only after the breakup did she realize the strength of her love for Yi-jun. Yi-jun is covered in sweat with horror when he reads these messages. He believes that Siwoo has gone mad. Subsequent messages contain information about gossip within the company, which refers to Yi-jun losing money on investments. Siwoo writes over and over again, and when she doesn't get an answer, she gets irritated. As a result, she only throws insults and threats at him. In recent messages, Siwoo threatens that Yi-jun will have a hard time at work. This behavior impresses Yi-jun, but he immediately blocks all of his ex-wife's phone numbers so that she can no longer bombard him with messages. He once again admits that the divorce from Siwoo was one of the best events in his life. The next day, he comes to work with full bags of souvenirs for his colleagues and in high spirits. He is alarmed by the fact that the company's employees look extremely sad. He tries to understand what has happened to the atmosphere when several people from his department approach him. They ask Yijun about his vacation experiences and share their own investment success with Yijun's advice. Then Yijun realizes that the reason for the decline in mental strength in the team is unsuccessful investments in cryptocurrency and large financial losses. Suddenly, from behind his back, someone mockingly calls for Yijun, who has returned from vacation. Senior colleagues with whom he has a good relationship, namely the manager and the head of the department, come closer to say hello. Yijun is very happy to see them both after so many days of his absence. He takes them to the meeting room to give them the souvenirs he brought, which are expensive watches. Taking the Rolexes in their hands, the men look at them in shock, afraid to believe in the reality of what is happening. However, the man confirms that they have a branded item in their hands. Yijun expresses his gratitude to the men for their help and understanding during the last years of his work. That's why he wanted to make memorable gifts to the manager and the head of the department. However, the manager suddenly frowns, his face darkening, and sighs heavily. Yijun is surprised by such a strange reaction to his gift. The men begin to make excuses that they cannot accept such an expensive and special gift. Yijun tries to reason with them, telling them not to worry about the price because it doesn't matter much to him. The head of the department, sweating, says that someone is chatting around the office that Yijun has lost his assets. Yijun immediately refutes this information, which surprises and pleases the men. They notice that the rumor has not appeared for the first time. After receiving information about who may be the gossip peddler, Yijun goes to the roof for a break. Almost immediately, James, the colleague who let other employees down in the story with cryptocurrency, rises next, pretending to care about Yijun. James tries to find out if he is doing well financially. Yijun smirks contentedly as he begins to drive the man into his trap. In the past, James had always bullied him and other employees with less experience, so Yijun had a good chance to get revenge. He decides to confirm the rumors spread by James to see where it leads. James always looks down on everyone if they are inferior to him in any way, and for the sake of satisfying his pride, he is ready to harm other people. Yijun knew that he would be angry when he found out about his success, but he didn't think it would be so neglected. James explains his curiosity by his excitement for Yijun and his future. He puts pressure on the man, offering him to freely talk about his problems. Deciding to play along with him in the name of executing his plan, Yijun decides to give James some information. Yijun replies that things are not going well for him, and he did not want to tell anyone, but he can trust James. James immediately beams and begins to convince Yijun that he won't tell anyone. Yijun then gives him information that he has gone broke and has less than 10 million won left in his account, trying his best not to burst out laughing. James feels sorry for Yijun and thanks him for sharing his problems with him. At this point, the trap that Yijun has set closes, and although James promised not to tell anyone about Yijun's situation, he immediately goes to the office premises and starts new rumors. Because of his words, colleagues begin to chat about the fact that Yijun sold his assets and came to collapse. It is not easy for James to keep his face. He is shaking with delight because of the people's disappointment in Yijun. James experiences unprecedented joy. He sees Yijun as nothing more than an annoying caterpillar and wants to trample him. James needs Yijun to remain a step below him for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the employees' chatter is interrupted by one of their colleagues. He announces that a large corporate dinner party will be held this evening. James snorts contemptuously, believing that they will be offered cheap cuisine again, and he is above that. However, in fact, dinner will be at a restaurant famous for Korean beef of the highest quality in all of Gangnam. Of course, such a promise arouses the curiosity of employees. In the expensive restaurant where they come, they are greeted as important people. The company's employees are shocked to doubt that they can be in a place like this. However, they quickly decide that since they were invited, they need to take advantage of the situation. Usually, in such a restaurant, you can only visit a meeting with really rich people, which is why the dishes are more expensive than ordinary employees can afford. James thinks about who could be the one who gathered the employees for a company dinner. Suddenly, to his surprise, Yijun enters the restaurant accompanied by the manager and the head of the department. This annoys James because he sees it as boasting about his closeness to department heads. However, at the same moment, Yijun takes the microphone and announces to everyone that he organized this event. This shocks all colleagues present, except those who were aware of Yijun's plan. Yijun explains that he has no special intentions and this dinner is just a pastime with colleagues. Since he couldn't bring many souvenirs, he decided to order a good dinner for everyone. Yijun's colleagues are shocked by the highest quality meat that the waiters take out. James realizes that the 10 million won that Yijun should have in his account would not be enough for such a dinner. Everyone around begins to whisper about the rumors that James has been spreading. spreading. As a result, the idea that James was spreading rumors intentionally still sounds at the table. James responds by aggressively arguing that Yijun told him about his losses. Suddenly, the head of the department raises his voice and, as if casually, says that Yijun does not make mistakes. These words attract the attention of James, who feels ashamed. The head of the department continues that he also lost a lot of money on cryptocurrency, but that's only because he didn't listen to Yijun. Instead, he decided to trust James, who was confident in his words, and now he is spreading rumors about Yijun which are clearly false. This annoys the man. James tries to come up with at least something to justify himself, but the words do not come to mind. Yijun leisurely walks over to his desk and calls the man's name. As before, he wouldn't have paid any attention to James's gossip. He simply had no choice but to put up with it. But now everything had changed. Grinning contentedly, Yijun says that the evening has been prepared especially for James. This, of course, immediately causes James to go into a rage when he realizes that he has fallen into a trap. Colleagues begin to discuss that James blurted out the secret that Yijun entrusted to him, and after that, he sits quietly here. James feels ashamed and angry that he has been trapped and cannot justify himself. Others laugh at his greed because he could not refuse expensive beef, so he came. James's eyes darken more and more, but he can't say a word. Yijun and the head of his department exchange signs of their success with smirks. Suddenly, the head of the department is distracted by someone entering the restaurant. He shudders in fright and starts perspiring. Yijun and his colleagues turn excitedly to the door. The guest is one of the heads of the company. Yijun's colleagues stand to greet him, but the executive chuckles and asks them to sit and continue their dinner. He has stopped by specifically to see Yijun. Surprised by this unexpected visit, Yijun watches the executive from the corner of his eye. They sit down together, and Yijun places the meat on the grill for his boss. The other colleagues are clearly uncomfortable, but Yijun remains calm. The executive takes a bottle of soju, congratulating Yijun on his investment success. Yijun, in turn, pours him a drink and thanks him for his praise. The executive laughs, saying if he had known about Yijun's talent, he would have created an investment department just for him. Despite smiling politely, Yijun doesn't fully understand the reason behind the executive's visit. His suspicion is confirmed when the executive suddenly says that Yijun doesn't understand women as well as he does investments. The director mocks that the breakup with Siwoo was Yijun's greatest mistake. This statement causes Yijun to clench his teeth. The director continues, saying that Yijun didn't appreciate the rare woman Siwoo was, even though he was the one who proposed the divorce. He mocks Yijun, saying it was really Siwoo who was tired of him. Thanks to Yijun's foolishness, the director claims he has found happiness. Though Yijun guesses the implication, he decides to ask what the director means. It turns out that while Yijun was absent, Siwoo grew close to the director. The director came to the restaurant to announce their relationship, advising Yijun to keep personal and professional matters separate. The director continues to praise himself, belittling Yijun, saying not everyone can be with someone as beautiful as Siwoo. But Yijun interrupts him, calmly and loudly congratulating the director. He pours the man another drink, wishing him and Siwoo a long and happy life together. However, deep inside, Yijun already sympathizes with the director's future. After dinner, Yijun steps outside to clear his head from the alcohol and emotions. Though he doesn't want to think about Siwoo, memories resurface. He recalls how they were once happy together. They had started dating quickly after a brief flirtation, marrying 6 months later in a traditional ceremony. Yijun reflects on how much he wanted a family, holding on to Siwoo's hand until the very end. But the harsh reality after marriage revealed significant differences between their personalities. He faced constant neglect from her family, and their married life became a nightmare. In the end, they mutually agreed to divorce after only a year. Today, Yijun had hoped to enjoy good news over a peaceful lunch, but reality, once again, had other plans. Yijun wanted to feel support from his wife during difficult times. He was determined to be a completely different parent than his father. But now, because of the alcohol, he feels overly sentimental. Meanwhile, Jinna is running late through the streets of Seoul, hurrying to a restaurant for dinner. Each of them is immersed in their own thoughts, and it seems as if they are about to meet, but this doesn't happen. When Jinna finally reaches the restaurant, it turns out that dinner has already ended. On his way, Yijun encounters a familiar face framed by blonde hair. Not far from him, Rose is standing, smiling warmly at the man. Yijun brings Rose home to warm her up, as the winters in Korea are colder than she expected. He wonders what brought the American to Korea, but Rose thinks the answer is obvious. She came because she wanted to see Yijun. She had landed the job she wanted but still had about 10 days before it started, so she decided to spend them in Seoul. Rose asks if she can stay with Yijun, who feels embarrassed by the fact that he only has one bed at home. Rose laughs, saying they're both used to such conditions. Rose Rose shifts awkwardly from foot to foot, afraid of rejection. With a sigh, Yijun agrees to let her stay and offers for her to take a bath to warm up. She smiles and heads to the bathroom, enjoying the relaxing warmth of the water. Meanwhile, Yijun decides to cook something hot for dinner. He washes and peels vegetables, thinking he could make something from traditional Korean home cooking. It had been a long time since he'd cooked for anyone, but he hadn't forgotten how. Yijun decides to make bulgogi for Rose, a traditional dish made from slices of meat and vegetables. At one time, Siwoo, his ex-wife, had despised him for cooking such dishes, believing they were beneath her. Although Yijun was confident in his culinary skills, Siwoo didn't care. After sending the food to the stove, unpleasant memories flood back. Everything he cooked for Siwoo was either thrown away or poured into the sink. She preferred dining in expensive restaurants, and Yijun couldn't offer that, leaving him feeling hopeless. Now, for the first time in a long time, he sets the table for dinner with a woman. But before he can sink deeper into his thoughts, Rose hurries into the kitchen, dressed in a bathrobe and drying her hair. She praises the aroma of the cooking, sitting down at the table and assuring him that she'll gladly eat whatever he's prepared. Yijun feels a bit nervous as Rose carefully takes her first bite. She puts a spoonful of meat and rice into her mouth and pauses for a moment. Yijun watches her intently, barely blinking as he tries to gauge her reaction. Rose beams with delight. She loudly praises Yijun's culinary talents, even blushing with pleasure. She recognizes the dish as bulgogi, having tried something similar at a Korean restaurant back in the States, but she likes Yijun's version even more. Her frank and satisfied reaction makes Yijun's heart race, and a smile forms on his face. After a hearty dinner, the two of them wash the dishes and clean up the kitchen together. Then, they change the bedding and head to the bedroom, where they awkwardly hover near the bed. Finally, they lie face to face, and Rose, exhausted from the journey, dozes off almost immediately. Yijun, however, cannot fall asleep. He looks at her with tenderness, thinking about Rose's feelings for him. He's afraid to start a complicated relationship but can't help but notice that she is in love with him. His hand involuntarily reaches for her blonde hair, tucking a strand behind her ear. The fear of letting Rose get closer is rooted in his worry that she might hurt him if he opens his heart. He thought he was doing fine, but the scars from his divorce were deeper than he had realized. Still, meeting Rose made him doubt whether loneliness was truly the right path. Half asleep, she moves closer and snuggles against Yijun. He can't resist gently touching her forehead with his lips, his thoughts consumed by his feelings. At the touch, Rose opens her eyes and they look at each other, both embarrassed. The air between them crackles with tension. Rose gently touches Yijun's chest, not wanting to push away someone who's looking at her with such warmth. Yijun pulls her closer and presses his lips to hers, no longer able to resist her charm. They spend the night together. The next morning, the scene shifts to an office at a pharmaceutical company that works with Yijun's business. The director of the company is on the phone with a partner and is horrified to learn that several contracts have been broken. Over the past month, multiple contractors have refused to work with the company. Just then, the phone rings loudly, and the CEO grabs the receiver, surprised to hear Yijun's voice on the other end. After a brief conversation, they arrange a meeting, and Yijun arrives at the office. The director recalls meeting Yijun 3 years ago when he was still a rookie and regrets not taking him seriously back then. The meeting was arranged very quickly, but Yijun assures him there's no need to apologize as he had requested the meeting without prior arrangement. Meanwhile, the employees are curious about Rose, who is accompanying Yijun. When asked, Yijun explains that Rose works alongside him, piquing their interest. The men are also curious about Yijun's reason for visiting. A little nervous, Yijun asks if the director has experienced difficulties managing the company recently. The director confirms this but mentions that Yijun's company still provides many good orders and there are several important projects ahead. However, Yijun reveals that another pharmaceutical company is putting pressure on theirs. The men at the meeting are stunned by his awareness of internal corporate issues. Yijun continues, explaining that due to the company's expansion, it is short on capital and their competitors are pressuring their partners to terminate contracts. The men realize that the ultimate goal of the competitors is to take over the company at a lower price. Yijun reassures them, stating that he is attending the meeting as a private individual, not as a representative of his company. He then declares that he would like to invest his personal funds into the director's company. The director is surprised to hear that Yijun is involved in investing. From the start, he had wondered about the purpose of Yijun's visit. Despite needing money to sustain the company, the director refuses Yijun's offer. He is uncertain whether the company will stay for more than 3 months and worries that Yijun won't be able to recover his investment. The director suggests that the thousands or millions Yijun is willing to allocate should be put toward another cause. Yijun only sighs heavily in response to the conversation, once again underestimated. He pauses, carefully choosing his words, wanting to maintain the intrigue. The men from the company interpret his silence as a negative reaction, Yi-jun, but Yi-jun suddenly asks, "How much money will help the company get out of the crisis?" The director is caught off guard, still not accustomed to seeing Yi-jun as more than just a newcomer. Yi-jun then shocks him by revealing he was considering billions of dollars in investments. Since Yi-jun holds great respect for the director's drug company, he's eager to support it financially. He invites them to look at the total amount of assets in his account and name any sum they need. The representatives of the company are speechless, staring at Yi-jun's phone in disbelief. They realize the seriousness of his intentions, knowing it's impossible to refuse such an offer. The men immediately begin preparing the necessary documents. Rose, ever quick to assess, starts researching the company. She notes that despite the current crisis caused by construction issues and loans, the company has high productivity and many customers with long-term contracts. Rose believes that once the current problems are solved, there's a strong potential for significant revenue growth. The director, listening to the conversation between Rose and Yi-jun, held in English, once again tries to figure out what Rose does. Yi-jun introduces her as a financial expert working for a major American company, making it clear that he was serious from the beginning. The director is still in disbelief, wondering how Yi-jun became such a successful investor in just 3 years. They sealed the deal with a handshake. As a gesture of goodwill, the director offers Yi-jun a business card for a representative of a bio company, suggesting it as another investment opportunity. After the meeting, Yi-jun and Rose drive around town in his Ferrari. Rose thanks Yi-jun for giving her the opportunity to make an investment estimate of $40 billion, a valuable experience. Then, she starts laughing and teases him about how she should be compensated for her work. When Yi-jun asks what she would like, Rose smiles mischievously and says she has an idea. She's been dreaming of doing something with him for a long time. Very soon, Yi-jun finds himself handcuffed to a chair in a dimly lit basement, blushing in amusement. Rose, grinning, suggests that they should have some fun. It turns out she brought him to an escape room, inspired by something she'd read online. Rose asks if Yi-jun is enjoying their prison escape game. He replies that he doesn't mind it but was a bit confused by the handcuffs. Suddenly, Rose sighs, expressing how difficult it is to work so far from Yi-jun in another country. She wishes she could see him every day, hinting that she's developing feelings for him. Yi-jun, thinking about her words, briefly considers buying the company she works for. However, he doesn't have the funds for that kind of acquisition just yet. Still, setting up a business in Seoul's commercial district might make a difference. While he contemplates, Rose's attention shifts to a nearby establishment, a movie theater designed for couples. Despite his lack of enthusiasm, Rose is excited about the idea of spending time there. Inside the theater, the beauty of the American woman immediately catches the eye of the employee, but his mood sours when he sees her with an ordinary-looking Korean man. The employee feels a sense of unfairness, internally resenting Yi-jun's success. He believes he's just as good-looking as Yi-jun, if not better. As Rose and Yi-jun select a movie, the employee, despite his bitterness, assigns them a room with a friendly smile. The employee then hatches a devious plan. He decides to wash the floor outside their room, hoping to overhear any inappropriate sounds. If he did, he could use it as an excuse to burst in, ruining their date and finding personal satisfaction in his interference. But after half an hour of meticulous cleaning, there are no sounds other than the movie playing. His plan fails, and all he can do is glare at the freshly polished floor. The man awkwardly looks at the door, unable to understand how Yi-jun can watch a movie alone with such a girl. Yi-jun and Rose are sitting on a special bed, hugging, but their attention is fully absorbed by the film. The movie is about an epidemic that claimed many lives, leaving a heavy impression. Rose involuntarily asks how people could have lived through such a crisis. Yi-jun responds that, indeed, there would be numerous casualties, and the economy would collapse completely. However, he believes the film exaggerates things. According to Yi-jun, there are always people who don't lose hope in any situation, and they would unite to defeat the disease. Rose looks at him with a satisfied smile and admits, a bit embarrassed, that she's impressed by his cool-headed response. Later that night, as Yi-jun and Rose sleep in his apartment, Yi-jun hears her breathing heavily. He turns her over and wakes her, horrified to see blood flowing from her mouth. Panicking, he grabs Rose, throws her on his back, and rushes outside to find a car to take her to the hospital. However, as soon as they step out of the apartment complex, Yi-jun is stunned by the sight of streets mired in devastation, bodies everywhere, burning cars, and the sound of sirens. Yi-jun cannot comprehend how the world has changed so drastically in just a few hours. The dead littering the streets terrify him. As he tries to bring Rose to her senses, she whispers something, barely breathing. When Yi-jun listens closely, Rose suddenly screams that it's all his fault and transforms into a zombie. In a cold sweat, Yi-jun wakes up, relieved to realize it was just a nightmare. Sitting up in bed, he looks anxiously at Rose, who is sleeping peacefully next to him, looking completely healthy. He jumps out of bed, goes to his desk, and pulls out a business business card he received recently. He recalls the director of a pharmaceutical company mentioning his investment in a bio company that was researching flu strains and developing vaccines using artificial intelligence. Disturbed by his dream, Yi-jun decides to make a difference. He calls the number on the business card, and a few hours later, he takes Rose to the airport. She says goodbye with a hint of sadness. Yi-jun gently hugs her and promises to contact her when he's back in the States. He feels a pang of sadness watching Rose leave, knowing she had stirred such strong emotions in him. Suddenly, Yi-jun feels his phone vibrate in his pocket. He answers and is surprised to hear his friend Han Sha laughing. Han Sha jokes about Yi-jun being so scared by a nightmare that he immediately decided to invest in medicine. Embarrassed, Yi-jun clarifies that he only scheduled a meeting to discuss the investment. Han Sha, though still amused, warns that developing a vaccine using artificial intelligence might not be easy. He points out that even if successful, bringing such a drug to market, especially a competitive one, could take 8 to 15 years, and the profitability may not be worth the investment. Yi-jun, still rattled by his dream, feels conflicted. Han Sha suggests that Yi-jun consult an expert and offers to introduce him to someone in medical research. To Yi-jun's surprise, the expert, John, answers the video call from the gym mid-workout. John, a professor of infectious diseases at an American university hospital, casually chats with Yi-jun, who feels slightly embarrassed but intrigued by the professor's laid-back approach. John asks what led Yi-jun to seek his advice. Yi-jun explains his interest in developing vaccines using artificial intelligence. John remarks that it's a fascinating and highly relevant topic for scientists. Artificial intelligence is already being used in medicine, especially in drug development and genetic analysis, though performance remains limited. However, John adds, major companies are already invested in this area, eager to push the technology forward. Yi-jun is surprised to learn that artificial intelligence is already being utilized and that the competition in the market is strong. The situation turns out to be more complicated than Yi-jun imagined. After listening to Yi-jun's story, John suddenly remembers a friend who shares Yi-jun's belief that artificial intelligence should be used to develop vaccines. Coincidentally, this friend is also Korean. Combining these two thoughts, Yi-jun asks if it's the doctor he's already been in contact with. John confirms that it's the same doctor and reveals that he had told Yi-jun about the research company where this Dr. Mike works. Yi-jun is surprised to learn that John and Dr. Mike were friends when they studied together. John considers Mike a real genius who has the potential to change the world. Despite his brilliance, Dr. Mike had left the US for Korea, a decision that puzzled many, but John explains that it was due to an incident where Mike punched a professor who spoke disparagingly about his research. After that, Mike left the university, deciding to work alone. Yi-jun is worried, imagining that Dr. Mike might be difficult to deal with, especially if he finds out Yi-jun is having second thoughts about investing. He fears Mike might punch him too. John is eager to join Yi-jun in his meeting with Dr. Mike and volunteers to come to Seoul. The very next day, they meet at the research center where Dr. Mike works. Dr. Mike, taller and broader than Yi-jun, is a pleasant person, but the CEO of the bio company, where Yi-jun plans to invest, appears weak and tormented. John and Mike happily greet each other after their long separation. Yi-jun breathes a sigh of relief because Mike doesn't look as intimidating as he had imagined. However, just as Yi-jun is about to discuss the investment, Dr. Mike starts coughing up blood, spraying it over the men standing in front of him. John sympathetically holds his coughing friend, stroking his back, while Yi-jun looks on with an awkward smile, already considering whether to invest in something else. After drinking some energy drinks and regaining his composure, Mike introduces himself to Yi-jun again and apologizes for the inconvenience. John jokes that Mike's troubles stem from his lack of exercise. Concerned about Mike's health, Yi-jun asks if everything is okay, and it turns out that Mike hadn't slept for 5 days in preparation for the meeting. Yi-jun offers to reschedule the appointment so Mike can rest, but the doctor grips a jar tightly, spraying Yi-jun's face again, as he insists that time is running out. Mike explains that postponing the meeting would waste precious time, as it's impossible to predict where and when the next virus outbreak will occur. He shouts that it will be too late if they delay, and coughs once more, spraying everyone again with blood. By now, both John and Yi-jun are unfazed. Mike grabs a remote to show a presentation about his research. Wiping the blood from his face, he tries to gather his strength. Dr. Mike explains that the flu, though similar to the common cold, has significant differences. The common cold is caused by various viruses and has mild symptoms, while the flu is caused by a specific virus and kills up to 1 million people each year. Yi-jun is stunned by these statistics, not realizing the flu could have such serious consequences. Mike goes on to explain that influenza is constantly mutating, with past strains like bird flu, swine flu, and the Spanish flu. The latter claimed 40 million lives, and with the current population density, the danger of a new outbreak is even greater. Dr. Mike Mike is determined to prevent such a catastrophe. He warns that current flu vaccines will be useless if the virus mutates, and new vaccines will need to be developed using artificial intelligence. He hands research papers to Yi-jun and John, who continues to exercise while enthusiastically reading the documents. John is delighted that Mike continued his work after leaving the US, and praises his research, even though Mike doesn't have the largest financial support in Korea. John, overwhelmed with excitement, hugs Mike, causing his clothes to tear from enthusiasm. Yi-jun, tired of being shocked by these two men, listens as John exclaims that Mike's research is impressive and that he'd love to invest in it. However, when Yi-jun asks if the project has a great chance of success, John bursts into laughter and shakes his head, much to the shock of both Yi-jun and Dr. Mike. John clarifies that while this research seems like a worthwhile project for him as a scientist, it is difficult to talk to third-party investors about potential profits. It is impossible to predict how long the development will take, and the value of the research will depend on the new mutated virus. Of course, there is potential to earn a lot of money later, but for now, the investment is highly risky and requires a huge amount of money and time. Yi-jun is faced with a difficult choice. If he only considers potential profit, it would be wiser not to invest. However, Yi-jun wants to help advance medicine. Seeing the potential investor deep in thought, Dr. Mike comes up with a risky idea. He promises that if he doesn't achieve any significant results within 5 years, he will hand over all the research results to Yi-jun and resign. Both John and Yi-jun are shocked by Dr. Mike's determination, but this move demonstrates his commitment. Additionally, if his company doesn't succeed in 5 years, all the research will lose its value anyway. Dr. Mike is so determined that he is willing to risk everything to achieve his goal. Yi-jun becomes more interested in the investment and asks what the company needs. It turns out the company requires around 2 billion annually, though more would be better. After hearing this, Yi-jun declares that since Dr. Mike is so serious, he is ready to provide reliable support, offering an investment of 10 billion per year, totaling 50 billion over 5 years. Although Yi-jun is still uncertain if he's making the right decision, Dr. Mike's passion is worth the risk. Yi-jun approaches Dr. Mike, extending his hand for a handshake, wishing him success. Relieved, Dr. Mike suddenly coughs up blood, promises to do his best, and then faints, covered in blood. Yi-jun sighs but is intrigued to see what will happen over the next 5 years, both with the research and his investment. Meanwhile, at the company where Yi-jun works, Jinna is hurrying to start her workday. She enters her office, greeting her colleagues warmly. One of them greets her back, and Jinna asks if Yi-jun has arrived. Looking around, the coworker seems confused, mentioning that he was here only recently. Assuming Yi-jun might have gone to the roof, Jinna decides to follow him, excited to see her older colleague. She quickly climbs the stairs to the roof and, through the half-open door, notices Yi-jun talking to his manager. As she reaches for the door handle, she overhears snippets of their conversation. Jinna freezes, not wanting to believe what she's hearing. She stands motionless, afraid to breathe. Yi-jun hands his manager another application. This time, it's definitely for his resignation. Jinna remains rooted in the corridor, torn between wanting to intervene and being too scared to approach. Like many, Yi-jun had once dreamed of being unemployed with a huge amount of money. People have all sorts of dreams, but he considers this the most sincere. No more commuting through hell, no more suffering from overtime, and no more dealing with an unpleasant boss. Now, Yi-jun has complete economic freedom, and even if he doesn't work, his money works for him. He's finally ready to become an unemployed man with a huge amount of wealth. On Yi-jun's last day at the company, his manager tells him that he has always been a diligent worker and hopes he will succeed outside the company. Yi-jun sincerely thanks his colleagues for all the time they spent together, acknowledging how much the company has given him. When asked about his future plans, Yi-jun says he is considering continuing down the path of investing. His manager shakes his hand and tells him to invite him for a drink if he's ever around. The manager also whispers a congratulation to Yi-jun for becoming a controlling stakeholder in a pharmaceutical company. Although Yi-jun hadn't kept it much of a secret, he is surprised the manager knows about it. One of Yi-jun's younger colleagues bids him farewell with tears in his eyes, sad to see him go. The colleague hugs Yi-jun, who feels uncomfortable with the emotional display. The colleague quickly whispers to Yi-jun to give him a hint for the next big investment opportunity, wanting to follow Yi-jun's path, make a fortune, and quit his job. Overhearing this, the manager teases the younger employee, joking that there's nothing wrong with wanting to get rich. He even offers to sign his resignation letter immediately if he's that eager. In tears, the guy takes back his words and whines that he will work harder. The manager asks Yi-jun if he plans to go into other departments as well, and Yi-jun has a great plan for that. He has someone he needs to say goodbye to, so he heads up to the department where Siwoo works. The woman immediately begins mocking him for resigning, saying, a happy modest life awaits you, and that a poor man will always remain poor inside, no matter how much money he earns. Yi-jun is surprised by her statement and asks Siwoo to clarify. She replies that, even though Yi-jun got rich through cryptocurrency, his essence as a beggar will never change. She had already seen this trait in him once, and it disappointed her. Siwoo wonders when others will notice this as well. She's furious that Yi-jun doesn't react to her jabs and remains calm, smiling serenely. This infuriates Siwoo even more because she wants to see him as a pathetic loser. However, Yi-jun declares that he did get rich through luck, bought an apartment and a car, and is very happy, all thanks to their timely divorce. In a rage, Siwoo cannot believe that her once downtrodden ex-husband would speak to her like that. But Yi-jun turns his back on her and leaves, adding that he has marked her number as spam so she can never contact him again. He ignores her shouts and curses, but what does bother him is that he didn't get to say goodbye to Jinna. Jun isn't blind and has long suspected Jinna's feelings for him. He is grateful that she saw something in him, even when he was poor and had low self-esteem. But now that he has rose in his life, Yi-jun cannot reciprocate Jinna's feelings. He wanted to say goodbye to her gently, but perhaps it's better if she simply forgets him with time. Meanwhile, Jinna is hiding from Yi-jun in the office, afraid of running into him. Hanjo approaches Jinna and tells her she can still confess her feelings to Yi-jun. He assures her that she won't achieve anything if she's too afraid to even say hello. However, Jinna, feeling heartbroken, says that if Yi-jun is happy, then she will be happy too. As Yi-jun takes the elevator down, his mind races with countless thoughts. So much has happened recently that it's hard to process everything. Despite the fact that his father exploited him for most of his life, it was his father who miraculously gave him his first 25 billion. Yi-jun believed that, after his divorce, he would never start another relationship, but Rose and other people came into his life and showed him sympathy. Although he feels a little sad about leaving the company where he enjoyed working, a bright future awaits him. Yi-jun steps out of the company, where he worked for the past 3 years, feeling inspired and excited for new adventures. Unfortunately, soon after, the world is hit by a great tragedy. Field hospitals are set up everywhere as a new virus, unknown to science, grips the globe in a pandemic. Later, on an investment bulletin board, participants in investment chats are actively discussing whether to invest in cryptocurrency, stocks, or real estate. Suddenly, a participant named 10 million won joins the conversation. It's James, who once bullied Yi-jun at work. Now, however, James has become Yi-jun's devoted fan and has repented for his past behavior. The chat participants agree that Yi-jun's life must be incredible, and they're not far from the truth. Yi-jun has moved into a new house, even more luxurious than his previous one, complete with armed security staff and a personal swimming pool. Yi-jun's newfound popularity has even attracted a journalist to interview him. After receiving praise for his stunning home, Yi-jun contentedly replies that he purchased it for when he stays in Korea. This emphasizes that Yi-jun is now one of the 10 richest people in Korea, despite being only 32 years old, a remarkably young age for his accomplishments. Confidently, Yi-jun holds himself in front of the camera, dressed in an expensive suit, and smiles softly. He's grown accustomed to luxury, expensive cars, and travel, and now being on the covers of magazines doesn't surprise him much. Even so, Yi-jun still feels the urge to show off the magazine to Rose. He messages her, saying that he'll be coming to the States soon and wants to see her. However, he doesn't receive a reply, which makes him worry. This concern causes Yuhina, his new secretary and security guard, to call out to him several times to get his attention. Yi-jun apologizes for the lack of attention and this time seriously listens to Yuhina's report on the growth of assets and profits. All this leads to the fact that Yi-jun will soon become one of the richest people in the world. However, Yi-jun feels satiated and uninspired. He craves something new and groundbreaking. Just in time, Yuhina informs him that there's a message from Dr. Mike. In it, Dr. Mike reports signs of an impending pandemic caused by a dangerous virus. Although the origin is difficult to determine, the infection has already spread to many countries. Yi-jun regrets that an epidemic might occur, even though he has invested heavily in healthcare. Deciding to help solve Dr. Mike's problems, Yi-jun plans to build additional housing for his employees. Although they had rented a large bus to transport the laboratory staff, Yi-jun believes that such measures are insufficient. He proposes to act more radically and improve the employees' living conditions, since they work long hours, even at night, night, and it's inconvenient for them to live far from the lab. Yijun concludes that it would be best to construct a new building. To implement his idea, he contacts an old acquaintance, Sophia, whom he met on a plane during a business trip. They meet at a classic soul bar. Sophia is annoyed because she thought Yijun was asking her out on a personal date, but it turns out to be for business. Yijun wants one of her company's divisions to assist with the construction project, while Sophia had hoped the man she met 2 years ago was interested in something more. Yijun explains that he couldn't contact her earlier because he was busy traveling and investing. Sophia is surprised to see that Yijun now has a personal bodyguard, a large black man. Yijun explains that he hired the bodyguard to protect him while traveling, as he didn't want to be stabbed for a mere 100 euros. Sophia sighs but agrees to handle the construction, with conditions. One of them is that she wants shares in Chris's company, which Yijun recently acquired. Sophia's car company has a strong interest in autonomous driving, and Yijun calmly agrees, seeing no significant harm to himself. However, Sophia's second condition provokes more emotion from him. Embarrassed, she hides her face as if afraid to voice her thoughts, but eventually, she gathers her courage and admits she wants to get drunk with Yijun. Meanwhile, at her family's company, Sophia's father is having a serious discussion. The chairman's secretary informs him that Sophia has yet to return home, despite the late hour. Her father isn't surprised by her absence, as he is a workaholic himself. However, the secretary then mentions that Sophia is on a date with a man. This infuriates the chairman, as he can't imagine any man being worthy of his daughter. Back at the bar, Sophia is actively drinking bottle after bottle with Yijun. She tries to persuade Yijun to drink more, but he knows his limits. Yijun nervously sweats as he watches her behavior, not expecting this from someone so wealthy. He eventually hands Sophia over to her staff, who promise to take her home, and gets into his car to leave the meeting. As soon as Yijun is out of sight, Sophia instantly wakes up perfectly sober. It turns out she had learned from YouTube that pretending to be drunk might encourage a man to make a move. She decided to try it out on Yijun, but he was too embarrassed by her beauty and didn't take the bait. Still, Sophia confidently believes that no man can resist her charm. At the company office, Sophia's father is impatiently waiting for her. A negative aura surrounds him. Sophia asks him not to blow things out of proportion, insisting that it was a business meeting. She explains that she wanted to buy shares in one of Yijun's American companies. Her father is pleased that she focused on business rather than romance. However, Sophia then openly admits that she's been in love with Yijun for a long time, which shocks the chairman. Sophia doesn't care that Yijun is divorced, as she doesn't see anything special about dating and breaking up. She isn't interested in her father's dissatisfaction with her choice of partner. Her father complains that he introduced Sophia to many good boys, but she rejected them all. Sophia retorts that they were merely useless heirs to conglomerates. She prefers to follow her intuition, which tells her that Yijun is a special person. The next day, Yijun goes to the bio company and meets John, who throws himself at him with a hug. Suddenly, John is confronted with the sharp gaze of Yijun's guard. The guard sizes up John, and a spark ignites between the two pumped-up men as they begin comparing muscles. They agree to go to the gym together, barely covered by the remnants of the clothes they tore off while showing off. Yijun sighs softly. Afterward, Yijun asks John about Dr. Mike's health and learns that Dr. Mike worked all night and passed out. John describes the pandemic situation as dire. Just a month after the outbreak, the virus has spread to the United States, Europe, China, and Japan, with more than 25,000 new infections per day. The death toll is staggering. John asks Yijun to increase computing power to run artificial intelligence, which could help find a solution to the virus and develop a vaccine faster. At home, Yijun ponders the results of his visit to the bio company and contemplates his next steps. He sighs heavily, unsure how to boost AI power. One idea is to build a new facility to house a computer center, and he's also considering using foreign cloud services, though he's uncertain about their success. To distract himself, he plays video games, only to realize how much dust has gathered on his computer. An idea strikes him, one that could not only boost computational power but also start a new business. Restless with excitement, he jumps up, eager to consult his friend. Meanwhile, Yijun's guard receives an urgent call, preparing for a trip to San Francisco, where fierce virtual gunfire rages, not in real life, but in the game Han Sha is playing. Suddenly, a large black man appears in front of Han Sha's face, startling him. Frightened, Han Sha threatens to call the police but quickly realizes he's surrounded by Yijun's security team. Yijun apologizes, explaining that they called and knocked, but Han Sha didn't hear them. Once the misunderstanding is cleared up, Han Sha admires Yijun's bodyguards. Without lingering too long, Yijun asks his friend how he feels about superhero cartoons. Yijun is set on saving the world and wants to be heroes together. Han Sha, confused by the coin Yijun is fiddling with, is shocked when Yijun proposes creating creating their own cryptocurrency to tackle global problems. Yijun explains his plan. He intends to create a cryptocurrency to fund vaccine development, as AI power alone isn't enough. By leveraging blockchain technology, computer systems that mine the cryptocurrency would provide the additional computational resources needed to develop a vaccine. In return, people would receive the new currency. Yijun guarantees a minimum exchange rate, which would cover electricity bills and allow people to earn a bit of money. Although Han Sha is skeptical of the plan's profitability, he's impressed by its potential to save the world and is excited to be a part of it. Yijun also contemplates entering the entertainment industry, possibly shooting a movie or drama with their favorite actors. Han Sha is thrilled and asks to be entrusted with the job, promising not to let Yijun down. Together, they decide to assemble a team for the cryptocurrency project, offering top industry salaries. Yijun advises his friend to choose carefully, but Han Sha teases that real heroes are motivated by heart, not money. Yijun posts an announcement about the creation of a team on a forum where the strongest representatives of the computer industry gather, offering the fulfillment of any desires in terms of merch. Sponsors begin pouring in at lightning speed, and Yijun is shocked at how interested everyone is in his project. Han Sha laughs, saying it's the power of otaku, and he's not surprised that people are so eager to join the project. After a while, Yijun and Han Sha open an office for the IT specialists they've hired. As Yijun arrives, he meets a new employee at the entrance. She looks at him with interest, introduces herself, and then falls awkwardly silent. She chews gum and inflates a bubble while eyeing him actively. A little later, she writes in the general chat with colleagues that their boss is handsome, and everyone should be careful. This behavior embarrasses Yijun, but he's not annoyed. He's getting used to the quirks of these extraordinary personalities. He decides that all programmers have their oddities, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Despite having prepared the latest computers and offices, none of the employees use them. Everyone sits wherever they're comfortable with their laptops. Yijun approaches Han Sha to get an interim report. Things are going great, and Han Sha is dedicating a lot of time to their project, taking a break from his usual work. However, there's one person Han Sha wants to introduce to Yijun, a brilliant programmer named Eddie. Eddie works separately from everyone else, never makes mistakes in his code, and puts his heart and soul into his work. Han Sha confidently considers him the heart of the project and hopes Yijun and Eddie will get along. Han Sha is also curious about what name Yijun came up with for their new cryptocurrency. Yijun calls it the original coin, which amuses Han Sha. In Yijun's vision, the original coin is a currency that can become the source of anything. While Yijun was developing his cryptocurrency, the situation at his previous company was tense. During breaks, employees gossiped about the appointment of Siwoo, Yijun's ex-wife, as the new head of the department. Everyone disliked her promotion, believing it was a clear case of nepotism, as she was in a relationship with the senior boss. Her subordinates doubted her ability to lead, given her lack of experience and skills. Siwoo overhears their conversation and harshly scolds the girls for gossiping during work hours. In her opinion, if anyone isn't happy working under her leadership, they can submit a resignation letter or join the previous head of the department in a city far from Seoul. The girls hurriedly apologize and leave the restroom. Siwoo repeats her new title out loud, savoring the power it gives her. As she walks down the company hallway, her attention is drawn to a magazine with Yijun on the cover. Angrily, she grabs it and throws it into the nearest trash can. As she walks, Siwoo reflects on the opportunity she lost when she let Yijun go. Her new admirer might have an annual salary of about 100 million won and comes from a wealthy family, but she curses Yijun, vowing to live a happier life than him. Her muttering catches the attention of a passing girl, Jinna, who has changed her appearance but has never forgotten her love for Yijun. Meanwhile, back at Yijun's American office, employees are working diligently. A film crew from the entertainment company Yijun founded is filming a documentary about him. They capture footage of him playing a game, but he loses again and again. The crew believes these moments make Yijun more relatable, though Yijun sweats awkwardly under the intense scrutiny. He doesn't even remember how he ended up agreeing to this multi-day filming process. Despite gathering outstanding talent, creating good working conditions, and investing huge sums of money, the entertainment company hasn't yet made much profit. The appointed director complains about the lack of content, although the team is filled with creativity. For now, however, no major breakthroughs or ideas have materialized. Employees are trying to reason with Yijun, noting that the worsening problem with the coronavirus makes filming difficult, but the director doesn't want to hear reasonable arguments. He wants to do something cool. Then, one of the agency's employees, the youngest, takes the floor. She's cynical, joking about the boss in response to his nitpicking, and she also has a good idea. This girl is a screenwriter, and she offers to make a documentary about Yijun. She's confident that such content can be popular with viewers. Their company doesn't have a flagship product yet, but its CEO is already quite popular. His story is full full of provocative material, from divorce to sudden wealth. So the company decides to use its own director, in the person of Yi-jun, to promote the company. They begin to delve into the private life of Yi-jun, including filming him at his less flattering moments. The CEO occasionally tries to escape the excessive attention, but Yi-jun understands the potential benefits since he started this venture himself. He's pleased with the way the company is growing. The number of employees has more than doubled, and the Seed Coin Pro project is also developing steadily. However, despite these successes, Yi-jun still can't get along with the brilliant programmer. Once again, Yi-jun approaches Eddie, trying to express his happiness that Eddie is actively using the game room. However, Eddie immediately sets strict boundaries, asking not to be distracted during his downtime and reminding Yi-jun that he only came at Hench's call, not Yi-jun's. Eddie doesn't obey Yi-jun at all, and his aloofness is thicker than Yi-jun anticipated. Yet, Yi-jun still wants to follow Hench's advice to befriend this odd guy. Apologizing for bothering him, Yi-jun places a folded piece of paper in front of Eddie. Mistaking the gesture for a bribe, Eddie is furious, believing Yi-jun is trying to buy his favor with money. Eddie threatens to leave, spitting out his disgust that all the talk about saving the world boils down to money again. Yi-jun grins broadly, not understanding why Eddie thinks this is about money. He invites Eddie to open the folded paper, explaining that it contains something much more valuable. Inside is a photo of a beautiful idol girl, Jennifer, Eddie's favorite performer, autographed. Eddie is speechless and freezes in place, clutching his heart and falling to his knees in awe. Lucas, concerned, explains that he has a small media company in Seoul that helped him secure such a rare item. Eddie, overwhelmed by the gift, looks at Yi-jun in a new light. Yi-jun adds that if Eddie likes Jennifer that much, he'll try to get him concert tickets if the opportunity arises. Extending his hand, Yi-jun helps Eddie stand, and from that moment, Yi-jun becomes almost saintly in Eddie's eyes. Hench's advice to use an otaku's interests to win them over turned out to be spot on, and Eddie's onboarding as a permanent employee is a success. Just as Yi-jun is about to relax, his phone rings. It's Dr. Mike calling with test result. Yi-jun asks about the current state of the coronavirus situation. Unfortunately, Dr. Mike has no good news. Health services worldwide are under immense strain, and confirmed cases are rising uncontrollably. If the infection rate doesn't slow, it's predicted that 70% of the world's population could be affected. Yi-jun, lost in thought, hears Dr. Mike call his name again, snapping him back to reality. Yi-jun instructs Dr. Mike to continue his work, promising to help increase the AI's power once he finishes developing the cryptocurrency. After the call, Yi-jun contemplates the pandemic's potential effects on the economy. The stock and bond markets could collapse, rendering his assets worthless. But for some reason, Yi-jun is confident he can make even more money in this situation. He realizes he can profit from the economic downfall using put options, a financial instrument that allows one to profit when market prices fall. Though Yi-jun feels uneasy about making money during a pandemic when so many people are suffering, he reassures himself that, as an investor, his priority must be profit. After all, without his current wealth, he wouldn't be in a position to save the world. Meanwhile, in the States, a senator running for president promises that America will save the world from the coronavirus. This news is broadcast in Rose's office, who finally calls Yi-jun. She's shocked and furious that Yi-jun wants to invest a large sum of money in risky put options, betting on the collapse of the New York Stock Exchange. Yi-jun laughs at Rose's and the financial advisor's attempts to stop him. Rose asks how much time she has to intervene, but it turns out there's only time until the end of the week, leaving her unlikely to change anything. This makes Rose even more enraged, and she literally yells at Yi-jun. In her opinion, no normal investor would risk losing 200 billion like that. However, Yi-jun remains monstrously calm, as if he knows the future in advance. He only laughs at how emotional his girlfriend is and can't do anything about it. After all, he missed hearing Rose's voice, so he listened to her with pleasure. Embarrassed by such a sudden confession, Rose immediately loses her furious mood, only grumbling that Yi-jun has become more reckless since taking the CEO's chair. She understands that her boyfriend is very rich, but such an investment is difficult for her to comprehend. Yi-jun, although not 100% sure of his decision, simply hopes his forecast is correct. He wishes Rose good luck in adapting to her new place, encouraging her not to give up and to believe more in herself and her potential. Touched by his words, Rose wants to say something tender in return, but she's interrupted when her colleague bursts into the office, warning that the break is over. Rose and Yi-jun hastily say their goodbyes. In his free time, Yi-jun contemplates what to do next. His employees are both relaxing and working. The film crew frolics in the pool, delighted with the spacious and comfortable house provided for them. In the US, the screenwriter reminds everyone that they came for filming. The men realize they've become too comfortable, indulging in the perks of wealth. They admit that Yi-jun's life is a bit too boring to film. People would prefer to see more shocking details about the life of one of the world's richest men. The screenwriter proposes conducting an interview with Yi-jun, focusing on his investments, as many would be curious about how he amassed his fortune and where he's currently investing. The film crew loves the idea and immediately begins planning its implementation. Yi-jun agrees to the interview but is surprised that the focus will be on his investments. Nevertheless, he reveals that he recently made a significant one. The tone of his voice intrigues the sensationalist producer. Yi-jun reveals that he invested 200 billion in a put option, a very risky move. The team is shocked, but Yi-jun reassures them that his expectations may be met. Almost immediately, Yi-jun receives the results of his investment. The producer believes he has caught Yi-jun off guard, thinking that such risky options rarely yield profit. The 200 billion investment might be perceived negatively by the public, as it seems like a gamble. Just as the producer considers abandoning the filming, Yi-jun calmly reveals that he made a 487% profit, earning over $1 trillion. The crew is left speechless. Han-sha enters the room, asking Yi-jun for some time. Apologizing, Yi-jun leaves the bewildered team, who still can't believe what they've heard. Han-sha brings good news. The seed coin project is finally complete, thanks to the excellent team they managed to assemble. Meanwhile, Dr. Mike is in the midst of a strange dream. He hears John's loud laughter and sees yet another training session that John is leading. All the participants strike muscular poses, boasting about their physical strength. The sight shocks Dr. Mike, even in his dreams. Finally, John notices him and calls him to join the training. Dr. Mike's lab coat transforms into a sports uniform. Startled by this nightmare, Dr. Mike wakes up in a cold sweat. In reality, John stands over him, chuckling, and greets his friend warmly. He explains that Dr. Mike lost consciousness again during the experiment, so John brought him to his home to rest. John even sent Dr. Mike's clothes to the wash and changed him into his own. However, Dr. Mike is more concerned with the experiment's outcome. Unfortunately, John has no good news. Despite using the cloud service, only 35% of the work was completed, and further calculations were impossible due to insufficient performance. John asks his disheartened friend to rest while he can. Dr. Mike, though exhausted, tries to get out of bed, insisting that now isn't the time to rest as the virus continues to spread. But John firmly stops him, warning that Dr. Mike is in no condition to conduct research in his current state. John reminds him that as a doctor, there's little he can do at this point, forcing Dr. Mike to reluctantly lie back down. Dr. Mike reflects on the fact that 7 years have passed since John pulled him out of that fight with the professor. John, surprised at how much time has passed, admits that he never liked the professor either, winking at Dr. Mike. This causes Dr. Mike to burst into loud laughter at his friend's reaction. Paul decides to find out what caused Dr. Mike to choose his path in life. Dr. Mike hesitates, unsure how to approach such a complex and tragic story, but he explains that it all began with the illness his younger sister had. It was an infectious disease that had consumed her body long before Dr. Mike could help her. John expresses his condolences to his friend as Dr. Mike takes out a locket hanging around his neck, gazing at the photo inside. Dr. Mike remembers his sister as a cheerful and talented girl who was never sick until the disease took her life. After her death, he vowed to eradicate the illness that claimed her, ensuring that no one else would suffer and die like she did. John, curious, asks what his friend's sister's name was, but before Dr. Mike can respond, one of John's employees bursts into the room, shouting that there are problems with the artificial intelligence. The news shocks Dr. Mike, and he freezes. Tearing out the four and grabbing his doctor's gown, he rushes into the lab with John. There, their attention is drawn to a large screen displaying various indicators. It shows that the artificial intelligence is actively investigating the virus. No one understands why computing performance has skyrocketed. Then Dr. Mike's phone rings. On the other end, Yi-jun asks if Dr. Mike is in the lab. It turns out that Yi-jun's company enabled the lab to move forward. The Source Coin project had been a success, much to the employees' delight. Yi-jun explains to Dr. Mike that he is using blockchain technology to allow the bio company to borrow computing power from other computers connected to the system. About an hour ago, the first mining of the new cryptocurrency began, and the number of miners is growing so rapidly that they are predicted to surpass 500,000 computers within a day. Yi-jun points out that without Dr. Mike's research, none of this would have been possible. He thanks Dr. Mike for his hard work and expresses his desire to continue working together to defeat the virus with capital and technology. At this moment, Dr. Mike, overwhelmed with emotion, begins to cry and doesn't know what to say except words of endless gratitude. Yi-jun promises to call him back and smiles, content that everything is moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, John moves closer to the crying Dr. Mike and asks what name he has given to the artificial intelligence. Dr. Mike reveals that he named it Soren, after his late sister. The lab celebrates as they realize a major breakthrough has finally occurred. Back at Yi-jun's office, the atmosphere is festive. The Source Coin Coin project has officially launched, and Yijun throws a party to celebrate. However, when he tries to give a speech, the programmers are more focused on celebrating with one another than listening to their CEO. Han Sha calms Yijun, advising him not to worry and to let the team enjoy the party. Yijun only hopes that everyone is genuinely happy with their success. Han Sha reminds Yijun that they will now have to cover the costs of issuing the source coin to an enormous number of people. The expenses could exceed 200 million per month, and Han Sha wonders if Yijun is prepared for such financial strain. To his surprise, Yijun reassures him as though such an amount is trivial. For Yijun, the more important milestone is that they've officially started creating the vaccine. Spending money on that makes him happier than anything else. Han Sha looks at his old friend from their student days, sighs softly, and remarks that Yijun has truly matured. Curious about Yijun's future plans, Han Sha prompts him to think about what comes next. Since project work can be short-term, the team discusses possible options among themselves, not wanting to part ways now that they've found like-minded people and a boss who truly understands them. Han Sha suggests that Yijun reflect on what his long-term vision is for the company. At first, Yijun is stunned by the sharpness of the question. He doesn't know exactly what he wants to achieve, but now, with a capable team by his side, his ideas have the potential to become reality. Gathering his courage, Yijun replies that he wants to create a proper cryptocurrency ecosystem. He acknowledges that cryptocurrencies often carry negative connotations, such as speculation and fraud. His goal is to improve their reputation by ensuring that source coin has a minimum guaranteed value and can be used across various industries, making it a truly valuable virtual currency. As he speaks, Yijun becomes excited, but the room remains silent. Embarrassed by the lack of reaction, he begins to doubt himself, worrying that he said something foolish. Even Eddie, and the programmer girl who has a crush on him, are watching him intently. Yijun feels nervous, convinced that he made a fool of himself by declaring something fantastic and unattainable in front of people much smarter than him. But then, the sound of applause fills the room. The entire team looks at him with respect and admiration, clapping loudly. The reaction, so opposite from what he expected, leaves Yijun speechless. Eddie, barely holding back tears, praises their boss's ambitious vision. Everyone sees the value in Yijun's dreams and is excited to work toward them. The programmers, moved by his words, unanimously agree to follow him. Yijun is stunned by their enthusiastic response. Han Sha tells him that his goal has touched the team's hearts. Even Han Sha himself is considering quitting his job to fully dedicate himself to following his friend, believing that real heroes follow the call of their hearts. Overjoyed, Yijun appoints Han Sha as the company's vice president, asking him to continue working by his side in the future. After this conversation, Yijun officially forms the organizational structure of the team and establishes his company in San Francisco for full-time operations. They invest heavily in maintaining the reputation of the cryptocurrency, and even create a shopping center where goods can be purchased using source coin. With the original coin, customers can buy games and merchandise associated with them, creating a robust environment in which the cryptocurrency can be utilized for various purposes. Within a few months, the number of miners surpasses 1.5 million. Thanks to the team's efforts, Yijun's company becomes the largest in San Francisco in less than 6 months. A speech about the company's future, recorded by the film crew, is uploaded to video hosting sites and quickly goes viral. If you're excited for the next part, leave a comment, and I'll do my best to bring it to you as soon as possible.